Kate Reynolds thought she'd escaped her past, until her baby's cancer diagnosis forced her to call the one man she swore she'd never speak to again, Vince Moretti, the father who didn't know he had a son, and the crime boss she'd been running from for 2 years. Now, with 10-month-old Noah fighting for his life in a hospital bed, Kate faces an impossible choice. Let her child suffer without critical medical history, or invite a dangerous man back into their lives and risk losing everything she's built. One phone call, one desperate mother, one secret that's about to detonate both their worlds. If you're ready to witness a mother's fierce love collide with a father's ruthless power, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Kate and Vince's story reaches across the world. A sec. The fluorescent lights in Seattle Children's Hospital burned with the kind of sterile brightness that made everything feel unreal. Kate Reynolds sat in a vinyl chair that squeaked every time she shifted her weight, her eyes locked on the small form in the hospital crib. Noah, her son, 10 months old, with wispy dark hair and eyes that had just started to show hints of hazel. Eyes she'd convinced herself came from her side of the family, even though she knew better. The pediatric oncology ward smelled like antiseptic and fear. Kate had been breathing it for 72 hours straight, ever since the pediatrician had felt the swelling in Noah's abdomen during what was supposed to be a routine checkup. 72 hours since her world had tilted sideways and refused to right itself. Ms. Reynolds? Kate looked up to find Dr. Patricia Amendola standing in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral, in that way doctors practiced when the news wasn't good. Kate's stomach dropped even further, though she wouldn't have thought that possible. Can we talk? Dr. Amendola gestured toward the small consultation room across the hall. Kate's hands trembled as she stood. She glanced back at Noah, who was sleeping fitfully, his tiny chest rising and falling beneath the hospital blanket decorated with cheerful cartoon elephants. A nurse, the kind one with the gray braid whose name Kate kept forgetting, gave her an encouraging nod. I'll watch him. Take your time. The consultation room was barely larger than a closet, with a round table and 4 chairs that didn't match. Dr. Amendola closed the door and sat down, folding her hands on top of a manila folder thick with test results and lab reports. I'm not going to soften this, the doctor said. Noah has neuroblastoma. It's a cancer that develops from immature nerve cells, and in his case, it's originated in the adrenal gland. We caught it at stage 3, which means it's spread to nearby lymph nodes but hasn't metastasized to distant organs yet. Kate heard the words, understood them individually, but strung together they formed a sentence her brain refused to process. Cancer. Her baby had cancer. What? Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. What does that mean? What do we do? Treatment is aggressive but effective at this stage. Chemotherapy, possibly surgery to remove the primary tumor, followed by additional chemo and potentially immunotherapy. Dr. Amendola's tone was steady, professional, but Kate could see the compassion in her eyes. But before we begin, I need something from you that could significantly improve Noah's prognosis. Anything. A complete family medical history, specifically from the father's side. Dr. Amendola opened the folder and pulled out a genetic questionnaire. Neuroblastoma can have hereditary components. If we know about similar cancers, genetic mutations, or autoimmune conditions in the paternal lineage, we can tailor Noah's treatment more precisely. It could mean the difference between a good outcome and an excellent one. Kate stared at the form. The father's side. Of course. The father isn't involved, she said quietly. I understand that this might be complicated, but you don't understand. Kate's voice came out sharper than she intended. She took a breath, forced herself to speak calmly. The father doesn't know Noah exists. Dr. Amendola didn't flinch. She'd probably heard stranger things in this line of work. Mrs. Reynolds, I'm not here to judge your personal circumstances. I'm here to give your son the best possible chance at survival. If you can contact the father and get this information, you should. Today. Kate looked down at the questionnaire. Pages of questions about grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, medical histories spanning generations. Information she didn't have and couldn't get from anyone except one person. Vincent Moretti. Just thinking his name made her chest tighten. 2 years. It had been 2 years since she'd walked out of his penthouse in San Francisco at 3 in the morning, stuffed everything she owned into 2 suitcases, and driven north until the city disappeared in her rearview mirror. 2 years since she'd discovered that the charming, successful businessman she'd fallen in love with was actually something else entirely. Something dangerous. She'd been 26 when they met, fresh out of law school, working brutal hours at a corporate firm that treated junior associates like disposable labor. Vince had been a client, or that's what she'd thought. He'd come in for a consultation about commercial real estate holdings, and Kate had been assigned to his account because she was young and expendable, and no one else wanted to work the weekend. She remembered the first time she'd seen him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that was just starting to show silver at the temples and eyes so intensely focused they'd made her forget every word she'd prepared. He'd sat across from her in the conference room, listening to her nervous pitch about property law and zoning regulations, and then he'd smiled, really smiled, not the polite professional smile clients usually gave, and said, "You're better than this place. You know that, right?" 3 months later, she'd moved into his apartment. 6 months after that, she'd quit the firm to work as his personal legal consultant. It had felt like freedom. Vince had been attentive, generous, protective. He'd treated her like she was precious, like she mattered. For someone who'd grown up in foster care and put herself through college and law school on scholarships and spite, that kind of attention had been intoxicating. But Vince had also been secretive. Meetings at strange hours. Phone calls he took in other rooms. Business associates who looked at her like they were surprised he'd let her see their faces. She told herself it was just the nature of high-level real estate development, that she was being paranoid. Then came the night she'd woken up alone and gone looking for him, only to overhear a conversation in his home office that shattered every illusion she'd built. Words like shipment and territory and enforcement. A casual discussion about someone who'd been handled after failing to pay what he owed. Vince's voice, calm and cold, explaining exactly what would happen to the next person who tried to cut into his operation. Kate had stood frozen in the hallway, her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound, while she realized that the man she loved, the man she'd been planning a future with, was a criminal. Not just any criminal. A crime boss. The kind of person she'd spent her entire legal education learning to prosecute. She'd packed and left that same night. Vince hadn't tried to stop her. In fact, she'd never heard from him again, which had seemed like a mercy at the time. She'd moved to Seattle, taken a job at a small firm specializing in family law, and tried to forget he'd ever existed. Then, 6 weeks later, she'd realized she was pregnant. By the time Noah was born, Kate had constructed an entire life that had nothing to do with Vincent Moretti. She'd legally listed the father as unknown on the birth certificate. She'd built a small circle of friends who knew her as a single mom by choice. She'd poured herself into work and motherhood with equal intensity, determined to prove that she didn't need anyone. Now here she sat, holding a medical questionnaire that could save her son's life, and the only way to fill it out was to call the man she'd sworn never to speak to again. Dr. Amendola was watching her carefully. "Mrs. Reynolds, I know this is difficult, but I'll get the information." Kate stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the linoleum. "How soon do you need it?" "Before we start treatment, ideally within the next 48 hours. Kate nodded. Her throat felt tight. "Okay." She walked back to Noah's room on autopilot, her mind racing. The nurse with the gray braid looked up as Kate entered, then tactfully found something to do at the far end of the ward. Kate sank into the chair beside the crib and watched her son sleep. He looked so small, so fragile. The IV line taped to his tiny hand seemed obscene, a violation of everything innocent and perfect about him. Noah stirred, making the small whimpering sound that meant he'd wake soon and want to nurse. Kate reached through the crib bars and stroked his soft hair. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, baby." For what? She wasn't entirely sure. Sorry that he was sick. Sorry that she'd kept him from his father. Sorry that she was about to open a door she'd nailed shut 2 years ago and invite chaos back into their carefully ordered lives. Kate pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She'd deleted Vince's number the day she left San Francisco, wiped it from her contacts like she could erase him from her history, but she'd always known where to find him if she absolutely had to. The business card was still in her wallet, tucked behind her driver's license where she wouldn't see it unless she went looking. Vincent Moretti, CEO, Pacific Meridian Holdings. A legitimate-sounding name for what she now understood was a very illegitimate operation. She pulled out the card. The number stared back at her, innocent black digits on expensive cream cardstock. Her finger hovered over the screen. This was a mistake. It had to be. Vince was dangerous. The kind of dangerous that came with federal investigations and rival organizations and violence that didn't discriminate between guilty and innocent. Bringing him into Noah's life could put her son at risk in ways she couldn't even imagine. But Noah was already at risk. Cancer didn't care about her fear or her pride or her desperate need to protect her child from his father's world. Cancer just ate away at tiny bodies with ruthless efficiency, and she had one tool that might help fight it. Kate dialed before she could change her mind. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice she'd tried so hard to forget answered. "This is Moretti." Deep, smooth, with that particular quality that had always made her think of expensive bourbon and dark rooms. Kate's breath caught. For a second, she couldn't speak. "Hello?" A pause. "If this is a sales call, it's Kate." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. The silence on the other end was absolute. Kate could picture him, frozen in whatever he'd been doing, his mind racing to process the impossibility of her calling after 2 years of nothing. "Kate," he said her name slowly, like he was tasting it. "Where are you?" Not how are you, or why are you calling, or any of the things a normal person would ask. Where? Of course, that would be his first question. Location, territory, control. "Seattle, I'm in Seattle, and I need..." She stopped, closed her eyes, forced herself to continue. "I need your help." Another pause. When Vince spoke again, his voice had changed, sharper, more focused. "Are you hurt?" "No, it's not me." Kate looked at Noah, who'd started to fuss in his sleep. "Vince, I have to tell you something, and I need you to just listen until I'm done, okay?" "I'm listening." Kate took a breath. 2 years ago, when I left, I didn't know. I found out 6 weeks later that I was pregnant. I have a son. His name is Noah. He's 10 months old and he's in the hospital. He has cancer. She heard Vince inhale sharply. The sound of movement, like he'd stood up suddenly. "What kind of cancer?" "Neuroblastoma. Stage 3. The doctors say treatment is effective, but they need a complete family medical history from both sides, especially genetic information that could help them tailor the treatment. I don't have anything from your side. Vince, I need to know about your family. Your parents, your grandparents, anyone with cancer or genetic conditions. Please." "Where?" His voice had gone cold and hard. "What hospital?" "Seattle Children's. But you don't need to I'm on my way." "Vince, no, I just need the medical information. I don't need you to..." "You have a 10-month-old son who you're telling me is mine and he has cancer. I'm not sending you a fucking email, Kate. I'm coming there." The line went dead. Kate stared at her phone, her heart hammering. What had she done? She'd meant to ask a few questions, get some basic information, keep it clinical and distant. Instead, she'd just summoned Vincent Moretti to Seattle. To her son. To the life she'd built specifically to exclude him. Noah woke fully then, his face scrunching up in that way that preceded a full-blown cry. Kate lifted him from the crib, settling him against her chest. He nuzzled close, seeking comfort, and she held him tight while she tried to steady her breathing. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured. "Mama's here. Everything's going to be okay." She just wished she believed it. The next 6 hours passed in a strange haze of medical procedures and mounting anxiety. Nurses came and went, checking Noah's vitals, adjusting his IV, speaking in gentle voices about things Kate's brain refused to fully process. She fed Noah, changed him, sang him soft songs while her mind spun in circles. Vince was coming. The thought kept hitting her in waves, each one bringing a fresh surge of panic. She'd left San Francisco to escape him, and now she'd invited him directly into the one part of her life that mattered more than anything. She'd been an idiot, a desperate, terrified idiot who'd made a choice she couldn't take back. Dr. Amendola stopped by in the late afternoon to check on Noah, and discuss the preliminary treatment plan. Kate listened, took notes, asked questions that seemed to come from someone else's mouth. All the while, part of her brain was tracking time, calculating distances, wondering how long it would take Vince to get here from San Francisco. "We'll need that family history as soon as possible," Dr. Amendola reminded her as she prepared to leave. "The genetic counselor will be in tomorrow morning, but if you can get any information before then, it would help." "I'm working on it," Kate said. Working on it. That was one way to describe what she'd set in motion. Evening came. The hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm, quieter but never truly still. Kate was trying to coax Noah into eating some of the pureed sweet potato the hospital had provided when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I'm in the lobby. Where do I go?" Kate's hands went numb. He was here. Already. San Francisco to Seattle was a 2-hour flight, plus driving time on both ends, and he'd managed it in under 6 hours, which meant he'd left immediately, probably on a private plane, moving with the kind of resources and urgency that reminded her exactly who she was dealing with. She texted back the floor and room number, then sat frozen, Noah still in her lap, while she waited for the inevitable. Footsteps in the hallway. Steady, purposeful. A presence that changed the energy of the room before he even appeared in the doorway. Then there he was. Vincent Moretti looked exactly the same and completely different. Same tall frame, same dark hair silvering at the temples, same intensity in his eyes. But there was something harder about him now, something that suggested the 2 years apart had not been kind. He wore a dark suit that probably cost more than Kate's monthly rent, and he filled the doorway like he owned it. His gaze went immediately to Noah. Kate watched his face change, watched something almost like pain flash across his features before he controlled it. He stared at the baby in her arms for a long moment, and Kate found herself holding Noah a little tighter, some primal instinct making her want to shield her son, even though she'd been the one to make the call. "He looks like my father," Vince said quietly. Kate had forgotten about his father. She'd met Anthony Moretti once, briefly, at some business dinner. A stern older man with silver hair and sharp eyes who'd looked at her like he could see through her skin. He'd died of a heart attack 3 months before Kate left San Francisco. "Can I come in?" Vince asked. Kate nodded, not trusting her voice. Vince stepped into the room, and somehow the space seemed smaller. He moved carefully, like he understood that sudden movements would spook her, and sat down in the chair on the other side of Noah's crib. Up close, Kate could see the lines of stress around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." So she did. The routine checkup, the swelling, the rush of tests and scans and biopsies, the diagnosis, the treatment plan, the desperate need for family medical history. She kept her voice clinical, factual, trying to keep emotion out of it, but her hands shook where they rested on Noah's back. Vince listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving between her and Noah. "You should have told me," he said finally. "When you found out you were pregnant, you should have told me." "I couldn't." Kate's voice was barely above a whisper. "I knew what you were, Vince. I heard you that night. I heard what you said about handling people who didn't pay, about territory and shipments and enforcement. I couldn't bring a child into that world. So you decided for both of us that I didn't deserve to know I had a son. I decided that my child deserved a safe life." Vince's jaw tightened. "And how's that working out?" The words hit like a slap. Kate felt tears burn behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, Kate. Not to you, not to me, and especially not to him." Vince gestured at Noah. "But we don't get to go back and change it, so let's deal with what's in front of us. You need medical history. I have it, all of it. My family keeps detailed records going back 3 generations. "Why?" "Because genetic health matters in my line of work. We can't afford weaknesses." He pulled out his phone. "I'll have the files sent over tonight. Everything the doctors need. Hereditary conditions, cancer histories, autoimmune disorders, all of it. My physician maintains the database." Kate blinked. "You have a database of your family's genetic history?" "I told you, we keep records." Vince's attention shifted back to Noah. "Can I hold him?" Every instinct Kate had screamed at her to say no. but Noah was his son. The DNA test Dr. Amendola had mentioned would prove it beyond any doubt. And despite everything, despite the fear and the anger and the 2 years of determined avoidance, part of Kate recognized that Vince had a right to meet his child. "He's been fussy," she warned. "The hospital environment is stressing him out." "I'll be careful." Kate stood and moved closer, shifting Noah in her arms. The baby looked up at Vince with wide, curious eyes. For a moment, father and son just stared at each other. Then Vince held out his hands, and Kate, moving on some instinct she didn't understand, placed Noah into them. Vince held Noah like he was made of spun glass, supporting his head carefully, keeping him close to his chest. Noah studied this new person with the serious expression he got when he was trying to figure something out, then reached up and grabbed Vince's tie. "Hey there," Vince said softly. "It's okay. I've got you." Something in Kate's chest cracked. She told herself for 10 months that Noah didn't need a father, that she could be enough, that they were better off alone. But watching Vince hold their son with such careful tenderness, she couldn't deny the simple truth. Noah looked right in his father's arms. "We'll need to do a paternity test," she said, needing to say something to break the moment, "before we can legally use any of your medical information for his treatment." "Of course." Vince didn't look away from Noah. "I'll arrange it for tomorrow, whatever you need." A nurse appeared in the doorway, not the kind one with the gray braid, but a younger woman Kate hadn't seen before. She took in the scene with professional detachment. "Time for vital checks," she announced cheerfully, reaching for Noah. Vince handed the baby over with visible reluctance. The nurse bustled around, taking Noah's temperature and checking his IV while she chattered about what a strong little guy he was. When she left, the room felt too quiet. "I should go," Vince said, but he didn't move. "Let you rest." "Vince, yeah." Kate wrapped her arms around herself. "What happens after we get the medical information? After the paternity test?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. "That depends," he said carefully. "If he's mine, when the test confirms he's mine, everything changes." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you're not doing this alone anymore. I mean that Noah becomes my son legally, not just genetically, and I mean that you're both going to need protection." "Protection from what?" Vince stood, his height suddenly intimidating in the small room. "From the same things you were afraid of 2 years ago. You were right to run, Kate. My world is dangerous, but now Noah is part of that world whether we like it or not, because anyone who wants to hurt me will see him as leverage. The moment my enemies know I have a son, he becomes a target." Kate's blood ran cold. No, Vince, we're not. I'm not bringing him into your life. We'll stay in Seattle. You can visit, send child support, whatever, but you think geography is going to protect him?" Vince's voice was quiet but absolute. "You think Seattle is far enough? Kate, if people know he exists, they will find him. They will use him. The only way to keep him safe is to bring him under my protection. Real protection. The kind that comes with resources and security and people whose job is to make sure nothing happens to either of you. You're talking about taking us back to San Francisco, back to your world. I'm talking about keeping our son alive." The words hung in the air between them. Kate wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could handle this on her own, that she'd kept Noah safe for 10 months without Vince's help. But the truth was staring her in the face with brutal clarity. She'd been invisible in Seattle, anonymous, just another single mom in a city full of them. The moment Vince claimed Noah as his son, that invisibility would shatter. "I need time," she said. "Let's get through the medical stuff first. The paternity test, the history, the start of treatment. Then we'll talk about the rest." Vince studied her for a long moment. 48 hours, he said finally. "I'll give you 48 hours to process this. But Kate, understand something. I spent 2 years respecting your choice to leave. I didn't follow you. I didn't contact you. I let you go because I thought that's what you wanted. But that was before I knew about Noah. Now that I know, everything is different. You don't get to cut me out of his life, not anymore. I wasn't trying to... Yes, you were, and I understand why. But it's done now, so we figure out how to move forward together, or what?" Kate's voice came out sharper than she intended. "You'll take him from me? Use your lawyers and your money and your connections to prove I'm an unfit mother?" Vince's expression hardened. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think of you anymore. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the small room. The machines monitoring Noah beeped softly in the background. Footsteps passed in the hallway. The world kept turning while Kate and Vince stood locked in a standoff. Neither of them knew how to resolve. I would never take him from you, Vince said finally, his voice rough. He needs you, I can see that. Whatever else is true, that's true. But he needs me too, Kate. And I will do whatever it takes to protect him. Both of you, even if that means making decisions you don't like. Kate wanted to argue, but Noah chose that moment to start crying, a thin, tired wail that cut through everything else. She moved automatically, lifting him from the crib, settling him against her shoulder. He was warm and heavy and real, and she held him tight while she tried to steady her breathing. You should go, she said quietly. He needs to rest, and so do I. Vince nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Not the Pacific Meridian Holdings one, but something simpler with just a phone number printed on it. This line is secure, he said, setting it on the small table beside the crib. Call me day or night. For anything. I mean that. Okay. He moved toward the door, then paused. Kate, I know you're scared. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I meant what I said. I will protect you both, whatever it takes. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway until they faded completely. Kate sank into the chair, Noah still fussing against her shoulder. She rocked him gently, murmuring nonsense words, while her mind tried to process everything that had just happened. She'd called Vince for medical information. Instead, she'd opened a door that was never going to close again. Noah finally settled, his breathing evening out as he drifted back to sleep. Kate held him long after he'd gone limp in her arms, reluctant to put him down, reluctant to let go. I'm sorry, she whispered into his soft hair. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was keeping you safe. But safe was relative, wasn't it? Safe from what? From cancer? From criminals? From the man who was genetically programmed to love this child but came wrapped in danger Kate couldn't begin to navigate. She didn't have answers. All she had was a sick child, a desperate need for help, and the sinking feeling that the life she'd so carefully constructed was about to come apart at the seams. Basom. The genetic files arrived at 2 a.m, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who handed them to the night nurse with instructions to give them directly to Kate Reynolds. The nurse, bless her, had knocked softly before entering, clearly understanding that Kate wasn't actually sleeping despite the darkened room. These just came for you, she said, holding out a thick manila envelope. The gentleman said they were urgent. Kate took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of pages, medical records, genetic test results, family trees annotated with causes of death, and hereditary conditions. Everything organized with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that spoke of professional management. Vince hadn't been exaggerating about his family keeping records. She spent the next hour going through the files, making notes on the questionnaire Dr. Amendola had given her. 2 cases of neuroblastoma on Vince's paternal grandmother's side. 3 instances of genetic mutations linked to childhood cancers. A whole section on autoimmune disorders that had apparently plagued the Moretti line for generations. It was exactly what the doctors needed. Exactly what might help save Noah's life. And it had arrived in the middle of the night because Vince had made it happen. Kate set the papers aside and looked at her sleeping son. Noah was curled on his side, his small fist pressed against his cheek, completely unaware of the storm gathering around him. He looked peaceful, innocent, untouched by all the complicated adult mess that Kate and Vince had created. Your father is here, she whispered, and I don't know if that's the best thing or the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Noah, wisely, didn't answer. He just slept on while Kate kept watch, guarding him against threats she could see and ones she couldn't, wondering how she was supposed to navigate a future that had just gotten infinitely more complicated. Outside, Seattle rain began to fall, pattering against the hospital window. Kate listened to it while she held her son's hand through the crib bars, and she tried not to think about the fact that somewhere in this city, Vincent Moretti was probably awake too, making plans she wasn't going to like, setting things in motion she couldn't control. The call she'd made to save Noah's life had just changed everything. and there was no going back. The morning brought Dr. Amendola and two specialists Kate hadn't met before, a genetic counselor named Dr. Sarah Chen and a pediatric oncologist from the treatment team, Dr. Marcus Webb. They gathered in the small consultation room while Noah remained with the kind nurse, and Kate spread the Moretti family medical files across the table like evidence in a trial. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose as she began reading through the documentation. "This is remarkably comprehensive," she said, flipping through pages of genetic testing results that went back 3 generations. "Most families don't have anything close to this level of detail." "The father's family keeps thorough records," Kate said, keeping her voice neutral. "I can see that." Dr. Chen pulled out a yellow highlighter and began marking relevant sections. 2 cases of neuroblastoma in the paternal great-grandmother's line, both diagnosed before age 2. 3 carriers of the ALK gene mutation, which is directly associated with hereditary neuroblastoma. And oh, this is significant, a documented case of favorable tumor biology in one of the neuroblastoma patients who went into complete remission. Dr. Webb leaned over to look. "That's exactly the kind of information we need. If Noah carries similar genetic markers, we can adjust the chemo protocol to maximize effectiveness while minimizing long-term damage. But we'll need to confirm paternity before we can use any of this clinically," Dr. Amendola added, looking at Kate. "For legal and medical liability reasons." "I understand. The father is arranging testing today." As if summoned by her words, Kate's phone buzzed. A text from the secure number Vince had given her. "Paternity testing team will be there at 10 a.m. I'll come with them if that's okay. If not, I'll wait." Kate stared at the message. The fact that he was asking permission instead of just showing up felt significant, though she wasn't sure why. She typed back, "It's fine, come." The doctors continued reviewing the files, discussing treatment modifications and genetic counseling strategies. Kate tried to focus, tried to understand the technical language, but her mind kept drifting to the encounter ahead. Vince would be here in less than 2 hours. He'd see Noah again. They'd do the paternity test that would legally bind them all together in ways Kate still wasn't ready to accept. By the time the doctors finished and left her with a stack of consent forms to review, Kate's hands were shaking again. She returned to Noah's room and found him awake, playing with the soft rattle the kind nurse had given him. He smiled when he saw her, that gummy, whole-faced smile that made everything else in the world seem manageable. "Hey, sweet boy," Kate murmured, lifting him from the crib. "Guess what? You're going to meet your daddy again today. For real this time. And they're going to do a test that proves you're his, which means everything changes. But you don't have to worry about that, okay? Mama's going to figure it out." Noah grabbed her hair and yanked enthusiastically. Kate winced, but didn't pull away. This was normal. This was the rhythm they'd established over 10 months, just the 2 of them, navigating the world together. In a few hours, that dynamic would shift permanently. She was changing Noah's diaper when Vince appeared in the doorway at exactly 10 o'clock, accompanied by 2 people in medical scrubs carrying testing equipment. He looked like he hadn't slept, his tie slightly loosened, shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. But his gaze went immediately to Noah with an intensity that made Kate's breath catch. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning." Kate fastened Noah's onesie and picked him up. "These are the testers?" "DNA diagnostics. They're certified and bonded, and they'll have preliminary results in 6 hours, full results in 24. Vince stepped aside to let the technicians enter. "This is Ms. Reynolds and my son, Noah." "My son." He said it so naturally, so matter-of-factly, like it was already established truth rather than something they were about to prove. The technicians nodded professionally and began setting up their equipment on the small rolling table. The process was quick and painless, a cheek swab for Noah, who barely seemed to notice, and one for Vince, who submitted to it with the same calm focus he brought to everything. The lead technician, a middle-aged woman with efficient hands, labeled the samples carefully, and had both Kate and Vince sign chain of custody forms. "We'll call you as soon as we have preliminary results," she assured them, "usually around 4 this afternoon." When the technicians left, an awkward silence filled the room. Vince stood near the window, hands in his pockets, while Kate held Noah against her shoulder. The baby was starting to fuss, hungry and tired of the hospital environment. I should feed him, Kate said. I'll step out. No, it's fine. I'm bottle feeding now anyway. The cancer treatment would require medications that made nursing impossible, so Kate had reluctantly switched to formula 3 days ago. Just one more loss in a series of losses that kept piling up. She settled into the chair and prepared a bottle while Vince watched with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she began feeding Noah, the baby's eyes drifted half-closed in contentment, his small hand resting on the bottle. He's beautiful, Vince said softly. I know I said that yesterday, but he's really beautiful, Kate. He looks like you. The admission came out before she could stop it. Everyone says he has my nose, but the rest is all you. Your eyes, your hair, even the way he furrows his eyebrows when he's concentrating. Vince moved closer, sitting in the chair on the other side of the crib. Tell me about him, the last 10 months. I want to know everything. Kate hesitated. Part of her wanted to hoard those memories, keep them private, maintain some boundary between the life she'd built and the one Vince represented. But another part recognized the request for what it was, a father trying to claim space in his child's history, even the parts he'd missed. So she told him about the pregnancy, the morning sickness that had lasted well into the second trimester, the first ultrasound where she'd seen Noah's heartbeat and burst into tears in the technician's office, about labor, 18 hours of it, ending in an emergency C-section that had terrified her, about bringing Noah home to her small apartment and spending the first week convinced she was doing everything wrong. He didn't sleep more than 2 hours at a time for the first 3 months, she said, adjusting the bottle as Noah drank. I thought I was going to lose my mind. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, she's this elderly Chinese woman who lives across the hall. She'd come over sometimes at 2 in the morning when she heard me pacing with him. She'd take Noah and rock him while I showered or ate something. I don't know what I would have done without her. Vince's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have had to do it alone. I chose to do it alone. Because you were scared of me, of what I am. He met her eyes. Were you right to be scared, Kate? The question hung in the air between them. Kate looked down at Noah, who'd finished the bottle and was starting to doze against her shoulder. I don't know, she said honestly. You've never hurt me. You were never violent with me. But the things I heard that night, the things you talked about doing to other people. Vince, how am I supposed to reconcile the man who's looking at our son like he's the most precious thing in the world with the man who casually discusses breaking someone's legs for not paying protection money? You're not. Vince's voice was quiet but firm. Those are two different parts of who I am, and they don't reconcile. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I'm something I'm not. I run an organization that operates outside the law. I make decisions that hurt people. I've done things that would send me to prison for life if anyone could prove them. All of that is true. Then how? But it's also true that I would never let that world touch you or Noah if I could prevent it. It's true that I will protect you both with everything I have, and it's true that being his father matters more to me than anything else I've ever done. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. I can't change what I am, Kate, but I can control how it affects our son, and I swear to you I will keep him safe. Kate wanted to believe him. Some part of her, the part that had fallen in love with him 2 years ago, still trusted that when Vince made a promise, he kept it. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had gone to law school and understood exactly how dangerous his world could be, kept throwing up warning signals. What happens if you can't? She asked. What happens if keeping him safe means bringing him deeper into your world? What happens when he's old enough to understand what his father does for a living? Then we deal with it. Together. Vince stood and moved to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I can be the father Noah needs, starting with getting him through this cancer treatment. The word cancer brought them both back to the immediate crisis. Kate shifted Noah to her other shoulder, patting his back gently until he burped. Dr. Amendola said they'll start chemotherapy in the next few days, she said, once they've analyzed all the genetic information and confirmed the treatment protocol. It's going to be aggressive. 6 months at least, maybe longer. I'll be here for all of it. Vince, you can't just stay in Seattle for 6 months. You have a business to run. I have people who can handle things. He turned back to face her. And before you argue, understand something. I've spent the last 12 hours making arrangements. My second in command, Marcus, is taking over day-to-day operations. My lawyer is setting up remote access to anything that needs my direct attention. And I've leased a house 10 minutes from this hospital. 4 bedrooms, full security system, gated property. For you and Noah. For however long this takes. Kate's stomach dropped. You leased a house? Without asking me? I'm not asking you to make decisions about security, Kate. That's non-negotiable. If you want to stay in your apartment, fine, but I'm putting a protection detail on it. Or you can move into the house I've secured, which has proper defenses and space for medical equipment and nursing staff if Noah needs home care between treatments. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Kate's voice rose slightly, and Noah stirred against her shoulder. She forced herself to speak more quietly. You swooping in and taking over, making decisions, treating me like I don't get a say in my own life. Our life. It's our life now, whether you like it or not. Vince's expression hardened. And I'm not taking over. I'm doing what needs to be done to keep you both safe. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to control everything. Control and protection aren't the same thing. They feel the same when you don't have a choice. They stared at each other across the small room, the tension thick enough to cut. Noah whimpered, sensing the stress, and Kate automatically began rocking him, murmuring soft reassurances. The baby settled, but the anger between his parents didn't dissipate. Vince ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Kate remembered from their time together. What do you want from me, Kate? Tell me what you need, and I'll make it happen. I need you to slow down. I need you to ask instead of tell. She broke off, struggling to articulate the tangle of emotions in her chest. I need to feel like I still have some control over my life. The cancer took that away. And now you're here, and it feels like I'm losing even more. Something in Vince's expression softened. He moved closer, sitting down in the chair again, his posture less aggressive. Okay, he said quietly. You're right. I'm moving too fast. I'm used to making decisions and having them executed, and I'm not. This is different. You're not one of my people. You're Noah's mother, and I'm sorry. The apology surprised her. Kate had heard Vince apologize exactly 3 times in the year they'd been together, and 2 of those had been for being late to dinner. He didn't do sorry easily. Thank you, she said. But Kate, I need you to understand something too. The security isn't negotiable. I meant what I said yesterday. Once people know Noah exists, he becomes a target. I've already had to deal with 2 inquiries from people who shouldn't know I'm in Seattle. Word travels fast in my world. We have maybe 48 hours before someone puts together that I have a son. And when that happens, what kind of inquiries? Kate's heart started racing. Nothing immediate. Just people asking questions about why I'm not in San Francisco, why Marcus is running things. But those questions lead to other questions, and eventually someone's going to dig deep enough to find answers I don't want them to have. So what do? We get ahead of it. I make it known that Noah is under my protection. I establish that anyone who touches you or him answers to me personally, and I put security in place that makes it very clear that any attempt to use Noah as leverage will end badly for everyone involved. Kate's mouth went dry. You're talking about making our son a public target to protect him. I'm talking about making the consequences of targeting him so severe that no one tries. Vince leaned forward. Kate, in my world, perception is everything. If people think Noah is vulnerable, they'll exploit that. If they know he's protected, most of them won't risk it. It's about sending the right message. And what about the people who don't care about messages? What about the ones who'll try anyway? Then I handle them. His voice went flat, emotionless. Permanently. The word hung in the air. Kate knew what he meant. She'd always known what Vince was capable of. But hearing him say it so plainly, in the context of protecting their son, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I don't want Noah growing up in a world where people die because they threatened him, she said. I don't want that either, but I want him growing up even less. So we make the hard choices, and we live with them, and we do whatever it takes to keep him alive and safe. Vince's gaze didn't waver. Can you live with that? Kate looked down at Noah, who'd fallen asleep in her arms, his small face peaceful and innocent. Could she live with Vince's version of protection? Could she accept that keeping Noah safe might mean other people got hurt, or worse? She didn't have an answer, so she deflected. Let me see the house, she said. The one you leased. I want to see it before I agree to anything. Vince pulled out his phone and brought up a series of photos. The house was beautiful. A modern two-story in what looked like a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. Large windows, open floor plan, a fenced backyard with a garden. It looked nothing like what Kate had imagined when Vince said secured property. It looked like a home. There's a nursery on the second floor, Vince said, swiping through images, and a master suite with space for a crib if you want Noah close at night. The security is discreet. Cameras hidden in the eaves, reinforced doors and windows, panic room in the basement. But from the outside, it just looks like a nice family house. How much is this costing you? Does it matter? It matters to me. Vince set the phone down. $50,000 a month plus security costs. And before you tell me that's insane, understand that I spend more than that on a single business dinner sometimes. This is where my son is going to live while he fights cancer. Money is not a consideration. $50,000 a month. Kate's entire yearly salary at her firm didn't add up to half that. The number was so absurd she almost laughed, except nothing about this situation was funny. I can't pay you back, she said. I'm not asking you to. Noah is my son. Taking care of him is my responsibility. And me? Am I your responsibility too? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Vince studied her for a long moment before answering. You're Noah's mother. That makes you someone I protect. Whether you like it or not, whether we're together or not, you're part of my family now, and I take care of family. We're not family, Vince. We're just two people who share a child. For now, he said quietly. But that might change. Kate's heart skipped. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not giving up on us. I know you ran because you were scared. I know you think I'm dangerous. But I also know that what we had was real, and I don't think you've forgotten that any more than I have. Vince, I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now. I'm just telling you the truth. I never stopped. He broke off, seeming to struggle with the words. I let you go because I thought that's what you needed. But now you're here, and Noah's here, and I'm not walking away again. From either of you. Kate didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to argue, to insist that whatever they'd had was dead and buried. But another part, a part she'd been trying to ignore for 2 years, recognized the truth in his words. She'd run from Vince, but she'd never actually moved on. She'd just built walls and pretended they were enough. Before she could respond, Dr. Amendola appeared in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral. Miss Reynolds, Mr. Moretti, do you have a moment? They both stood. Kate settled Noah into his crib, making sure he was comfortable, while Vince moved to the doorway. The doctor gestured for them to follow her to the consultation room. Once they were seated, Dr. Amendola spread out several documents on the table. I've reviewed the genetic information Mr. Moretti provided, and I've consulted with our oncology team. The good news is that the hereditary patterns in your family history give us very specific targets for treatment. We can customize Noah's chemotherapy protocol to address the particular genetic mutations he's likely carrying. What's the bad news? Vince asked. The treatment is going to be aggressive. 6 cycles of chemotherapy over 18 weeks, followed by surgical removal of the primary tumor, followed by additional immunotherapy. Noah will be hospitalized for most of it, with brief periods at home between cycles if his immune system can handle it. Kate felt the room tilt. 6 months of chemotherapy. He's not even a year old. I know it sounds overwhelming, but children Noah's age actually tolerate chemotherapy better than older patients in many ways. Their bodies are resilient, and the survival rate for stage 3 neuroblastoma with this treatment protocol is around 75%. 75%. Which meant a 25% chance that Noah wouldn't make it. Kate's hand started shaking. Vince's hand covered hers on the table, warm, steady, grounding. She looked at him and saw her own fear reflected in his eyes, but also something else. Determination. The same intensity he brought to everything, now focused entirely on their son's survival. When do we start? He asked Dr. Amendola. We'd like to begin the first round of chemotherapy tomorrow, pending the paternity test results. Once we have legal confirmation of Noah's genetic history, we can proceed with the customized protocol. In the meantime, I need both of you to sign consent forms for the treatment plan. The doctor slid a stack of papers across the table. Kate read through them mechanically, pages of medical terminology and liability waivers, and descriptions of side effects that made her stomach turn. Hair loss, nausea, increased infection risk, potential long-term organ damage, all the ways they were going to poison her baby in order to save him. She signed her name at the bottom of each form, her hand shaking so badly the signature was barely legible. Vince signed too, his handwriting bold and decisive even on medical consent forms. When Dr. Amendola left them alone, Kate put her head in her hands. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't watch them hurt him." "Yes, you can," Vince's voice was firm, "because the alternative is worse, and because he needs you to be strong." "I'm not strong enough for this." "You are. You've been strong enough to raise him alone for 10 months. You're strong enough to get him through this." Kate looked up at him through tears she could no longer hold back. "How are you so calm? How are you not falling apart?" "I'm falling apart," Vince said quietly. "I'm just very good at not showing it." The admission broke something in Kate. She'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will, refusing to let herself break down because breaking down felt like giving up. But hearing Vince admit his own fear made it okay to acknowledge hers. She started to cry, really cry, the kind of desperate, choking sobs she'd been suppressing for 3 days. Vince pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her with a certainty that felt like muscle memory. Kate buried her face in his shirt and let herself fall apart while he held her together. "We're going to get through this," he murmured against her hair. "All 3 of us. I promise you, Kate. We're going to get through this." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that his promises meant something, that his protection was real, that they could actually survive what was coming. But all she could think about was Noah, tiny, innocent Noah, who was about to endure months of suffering he was too young to understand. They stayed like that for a long time, Kate crying into Vince's chest while he held her in the small consultation room. Eventually the tears slowed, then stopped. Kate pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize. You're allowed to break down. You're allowed to be scared." "So are you." Vince's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'll break down later. When you and Noah don't need me to be the strong one." They returned to Noah's room to find him awake and fussy. Kate lifted him from the crib and he immediately calmed against her shoulder, making the small, happy sounds that meant he was content. Vince stood close, one hand resting on Noah's back, and for a moment they stood there like a real family, mother, father, child. Kate's phone buzzed, a text from DNA. "Diagnostics. Preliminary results ready, calling now." The phone rang a moment later. Kate answered, her heart pounding, even though she already knew what they were going to say. "Miss Reynolds, this is Dr. Hammond from DNA Diagnostics. I'm calling with the preliminary paternity test results. The probability of paternity for Vincent Moretti is 99.99%. He is the biological father." "Thank you," Kate said numbly. She hung up and looked at Vince. "It's official. You're his father." Vince's expression shifted. Relief and something deeper, something almost like wonder. He reached out and touched Noah's cheek with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything Kate knew about him. "Hey, Noah," he said softly. "I'm your dad, and I'm going to take care of you, I promise." Noah grabbed Vince's finger and held on tight, his small hand wrapped around one of his father's. Kate watched them and felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight control she'd maintained for 2 years, a reluctant acceptance that things had changed irrevocably. "We should tell Dr. Amendola," she said, "so they can start treatment." "I'll call her." Vince pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, it buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. "I need to take this. It's Marcus. I'll be right back." He stepped into the hallway, and Kate could hear his voice through the open door, quiet, controlled, but with an edge that suggested trouble. "What do you mean someone's asking questions? What kind of questions?" A pause. "No, shut it down. I don't care who it is or what they want. Nobody gets information about where I am or what I'm doing. And Marcus, double security on all our assets. If someone's fishing for information about my family, I want to know who and why." Another pause, longer this time. "Do it, and call me back in an hour with a full report. Vince returned to the room, his jaw tight with tension. Kate felt her stomach drop. What's wrong? She asked. Probably nothing, just business complications. But his eyes told a different story. Kate, about that house, I need you to make a decision today. Because staying in your apartment isn't safe anymore. Why? What happened? Someone's been asking questions about me in Seattle, about why I'm here, who I'm with. Marcus doesn't know who yet, but the fact that anyone's asking means we need to move faster than I thought. Fear spiked through Kate's chest. You think someone knows about Noah? I think someone suspects I have a reason to be in Seattle, and they're trying to find out what it is, which means we have maybe 24 hours before this becomes a serious problem. Kate looked down at Noah, who was falling asleep against her shoulder, completely unaware that his existence had just become dangerous. The decision she'd been putting off suddenly became urgent. Okay, she said. We'll move to the house, but Vince, I need something from you. Name it. Honesty, complete honesty. No more secrets, no more hiding what's really happening. If we're doing this, if I'm trusting you to protect us, then I need to know everything. The threats, the risks, all of it. I can't make good decisions if I don't have all the information. Vince studied her for a long moment. You're sure you want that? Because once you know everything, you can't unknow it. I'm sure. All right. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Then here's the truth. I run the largest criminal organization on the West Coast. We handle everything from loan sharking to protection rackets to controlled substance distribution. I have partnerships with organizations in 3 other states and connections to international operations in Asia and South America. The FBI has been trying to build a RICO case against me for 6 years and can't make anything stick, and I have at least 4 rival organizations who would love nothing more than to see me dead or in prison. Kate forced herself to keep breathing. And now Noah and I are leverage against you. Yes, which is why I'm going to make it very clear that touching either of you means war, total war. The kind that ends with bodies in the street and organizations destroyed. Most people will respect that boundary. The ones who don't. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. You're asking me to trust you with our lives. I'm asking you to let me do what I'm good at, which is protecting what's mine. And Kate, whether you want to admit it or not, you and Noah are mine now, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, some primal part of Kate's brain responded to it, recognized it as safety. Vince was dangerous, yes, but he was dangerous in a way that could be pointed at threats, used as a shield instead of a weapon. Okay, she said again, we'll do this your way. But if anything happens, if anyone gets hurt because of us, they won't. I won't let them. A promise he might not be able to keep, but Kate found herself believing it anyway. Or maybe she just needed to believe it, because the alternative, facing this alone, was unbearable. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Vince made calls, arranged for movers to pack up Kate's apartment, coordinated with the hospital about Noah's treatment schedule. Kate signed papers, answered questions, tried to stay present, even as her world rearranged itself around her. By evening, everything was set. They'd move to the secured house tomorrow morning before Noah's first chemotherapy treatment. A protection detail would be in place. Marcus was flying up from San Francisco to brief Vince on the security situation. And somewhere out there, people Kate would never meet were asking questions about a baby they didn't know existed yet. Kate sat in the chair beside Noah's crib, watching her son sleep while Vince stood guard at the window. Outside, Seattle's lights glittered in the darkness, beautiful and oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Are you scared? She asked quietly. Vince turned from the window. Terrified, he admitted. But fear doesn't change what needs to be done. We move forward anyway. Kate reached out, and after a moment, Vince took her hand. They stood there in the darkened hospital room, holding hands over their sleeping son, while the world outside prepared to test them in ways neither of them could fully anticipate. Tomorrow, the treatment would begin. Tomorrow, they'd move to the secured house. Tomorrow, their new reality would fully take hold. But tonight, for just a few more hours, It was still the three of them in a quiet room, holding on to each other and hoping it would be enough. The house Vince had secured sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in Laurelhurst, surrounded by old-growth trees that created a natural barrier from the street. Kate pulled up in the passenger seat of Vince's black SUV, one of three vehicles in the convoy that had transported them from the hospital, and stared at what was apparently going to be her new home. It looked even better than the photos. Craftsman-style architecture with warm cedar siding, a wraparound porch with hanging baskets of flowers that someone had clearly planted recently, bay windows that caught the morning light. Nothing about it screamed, "safe house for the family of a crime boss." It just looked like the kind of place where happy families live normal lives. The irony wasn't lost on her. "What do you think?" Vince asked from the driver's seat. He'd been watching her face instead of the house, gauging her reaction. "It's beautiful," Kate admitted. "I just wish we were moving here for different reasons." Noah made a sound from his car seat in the back, not quite a cry, but the precursor to one. They'd kept him out of the hospital for exactly 8 hours, long enough to make the move and get settled before his first chemotherapy treatment this afternoon. 8 hours of borrowed normalcy before everything got harder. A man emerged from the house as they pulled into the driveway, late 40s, built like a boxer, with salt and pepper hair cut military short. He moved with the kind of efficient awareness that marked him as security even before Vince said his name. "That's Marcus Chen, head of my protection detail and my second in command." Kate felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Chen? As in related to Mark Chen?" Vince's expression darkened. "His younger brother. And before you ask, Marcus has been with me for 12 years. Mark worked at your firm for 3. There's no connection beyond genetics." The distinction felt important, though Kate wasn't sure why yet. She filed it away as Marcus approached the vehicle and opened her door with professional courtesy. "Ms. Reynolds, welcome. Let me help you with the baby." Kate hesitated, then allowed Marcus to take the diaper bag while she unbuckled Noah from his car seat. The baby was fussy, overstimulated from the move, and he buried his face against her shoulder as she lifted him out. "The nursery's ready on the second floor," Marcus said, leading them toward the house. "Medical equipment arrived an hour ago, monitors, backup oxygen, everything the hospital said you might need for home care. And Elena's inside. She's been setting up the kitchen." "Elena?" Kate looked at Vince. "Housekeeper. Former nurse, actually. She worked at a pediatric hospital in San Francisco for 20 years before retiring. I convinced her to come out of retirement." Of course he had. Kate followed Marcus up the porch steps and into the house, trying not to feel overwhelmed by how quickly Vince had assembled an entire support system. A woman appeared from what Kate assumed was the kitchen, mid-60s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "You must be Kate," Elena said warmly, "and this beautiful boy is Noah. Come, let me show you everything." The house was even more impressive inside. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, furniture that managed to look both expensive and comfortable. Elena led them through a living room with a fireplace and built-in bookshelves, past a dining room with a table that could seat 10, into a kitchen that belonged in a magazine spread. "I stocked the refrigerator and pantry based on what Mr. Moretti told me about your preferences," Elena explained. "But if there's anything specific Noah needs or anything you'd like added, just let me know. I'll be here every day from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, unless you need me overnight during treatment weeks." Kate's head was spinning. "That's very generous, but I can take care of Noah myself." "Of course you can." Elena's tone was gentle but firm. "But you're going to need help, especially during chemotherapy. Let me do the cooking and cleaning and laundry so you can focus on your son. That's what I'm here for." Before Kate could argue further, Vince touched her elbow. "Let me show you the nursery." They climbed the stairs, Marcus staying behind to confer with 2 other security personnel Kate hadn't noticed before. The second floor had 4 bedrooms, just as Vince had said. He led her to the largest one, a master suite with a king-size bed, sitting area, and ensuite bathroom that included both a shower and a soaking tub. "This is yours," Vince said. "And this?" He opened a connecting door to reveal a fully equipped nursery. Crib, changing table, rocking chair, shelves stocked with diapers and supplies, medical monitors on a rolling cart in the corner, ready but not intrusive, soft blue walls and curtains printed with clouds and stars. Kate's throat tightened. When did you have time to do all this? I made calls yesterday, had people working through the night. Vince shifted his weight, looking almost uncertain. If you don't like the colors or the setup, we can change it. No, it's perfect. It's just... She broke off, looking down at Noah, who'd finally fallen asleep against her shoulder. This is a lot to process. I know, but you don't have to process it all at once. Right now, just focus on getting Noah settled before we head back to the hospital. Kate nodded and moved to the crib, laying Noah down carefully. He stirred but didn't wake, his small face relaxed in sleep. She stood there watching him, acutely aware of Vince standing close behind her. Where are you sleeping? She asked. Down the hall, third door on the left. But I'll be close if you need anything. The fact that he wasn't assuming they'd share a room should have been a relief. Instead, Kate felt oddly disappointed, which made no sense given everything else happening. She chalked it up to stress and exhaustion and turned to face him. We need to talk about my job, she said. I took emergency leave, but I can't just disappear for 6 months without consequences. I spoke to the managing partner at your firm this morning. Kate stared at him. You what? I explained the situation, not the details, just that your son was diagnosed with cancer and you'd need extended leave for treatment. He was very understanding, said your job would be waiting when you're ready to come back. Vince, you can't just call my boss without asking me first. I know, and I'm sorry. But we didn't have time for you to navigate the bureaucracy, and I have resources that make these conversations easier. Consider it done and move on. Kate wanted to argue, to insist on maintaining some independence, but the truth was, she was grateful. The thought of having to negotiate with her firm while Noah was sick had been keeping her up at night. If Vince had taken care of it, that was one less thing to worry about. Thank you, she said quietly. You don't have to thank me for taking care of my family. There it was again, family. The word Vince used so naturally, as if the three of them were already a unit instead of two people still figuring out how to co-parent a child they'd made by accident. Elena appeared in the doorway. Mr. Moretti, Marcus needs to speak with you. Something about the perimeter. Vince's expression shifted instantly from gentle to alert. I'll be right down. Kate, stay here with Noah. Don't go outside until I come back. The sudden tension in his voice made Kate's heart race. What's wrong? Probably nothing, just a precaution. But he was already moving toward the door, his hand going to his phone. Elena stepped into the nursery, her presence calming. It's all right, dear. This is just how things work in Mr. Moretti's world. Better safe than sorry. Kate sank into the rocking chair, her hands gripping the armrests. Does this happen often, the security alerts? Often enough, but Marcus is very good at his job and Mr. Moretti doesn't take chances. Elena moved to the window and adjusted the curtains. I worked for the Moretti family for 5 years before I retired. Mr. Moretti's father, Anthony, was a hard man. Brilliant, but cold. Vincent is different. He has his father's strategic mind, but he actually cares about people. That makes him dangerous in a different way. What do you mean? Elena turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. A man who doesn't care is predictable. He acts on pure self-interest. But a man who cares, who has people he'll protect at any cost, that man is capable of things that would shock you. Not out of cruelty, but out of love. And that's a very powerful motivation. Kate looked at Noah, still sleeping peacefully in his crib. I'm not sure if that's comforting or terrifying. Both, probably. But Kate, I saw how Vincent looked at that baby, and how he looks at you. Whatever's coming, he'll move heaven and earth to keep you both safe. You can trust that. Footsteps on the stairs announced Vince's return. He appeared in the doorway, his expression neutral, but his posture tense. False alarm, he said. Just a neighbor walking their dog too close to the property line. But it's a good reminder that we need to stay alert. He glanced at his watch. We should head to the hospital in 30 minutes. Noah's first treatment is scheduled for 2 o'clock. The words made everything real again. Kate stood, moving automatically toward the crib to prepare Noah for transport. Her hands were shaking. Hey, Vince crossed the room and caught her hands in his. Look at me. Kate met his eyes, dark and intense and absolutely certain. We're going to get through this, he said. One treatment at a time, one day at a time. I'm going to be there for every single one. You're not alone in this anymore. Understand? Kate nodded, not trusting her voice. Vince squeezed her hands once, then released them and stepped back to give her space. The drive back to Seattle Children's Hospital felt surreal. Kate sat in the back seat with Noah, who'd woken up cranky and uncomfortable. Vince drove while Marcus rode shotgun, constantly scanning their surroundings with the kind of vigilance that made Kate hyper-aware of every car that got too close. At the hospital, they were ushered directly to the pediatric oncology ward where Dr. Amendola was waiting with her team. Noah's hospital room had been transformed. Medical equipment everywhere, IV poles, monitors, a small pharmacy's worth of medications lined up on rolling carts. "We're going to start with anti-nausea medication," Dr. Amendola explained as nurses began their preparations. "Then we'll administer the chemotherapy through his IV. The first drug is vincristine, followed by cyclophosphamide. The entire infusion will take about 4 hours." Kate held Noah while a nurse inserted a new IV line, and she had to fight the urge to pull him away when he cried. Vince stood close, one hand on her shoulder, radiating the kind of controlled tension that suggested he was battling the same instinct. When the actual chemotherapy started dripping through the IV line, Kate felt like she was watching poison enter her son's body, which, in a way, she was. Poison designed to kill cancer cells, but poison nonetheless. She sat in the chair beside Noah's bed, holding his small hand while Vince pulled another chair close and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "Tell me something good. Something from before all this." Kate's mind went blank for a moment, then settled on a memory from 2 months ago. Noah laughed for the first time when he was 6 months old. I was making faces at him during a diaper change, and he laughed. This bright surprise sound, like he couldn't believe how funny the world was. I called Mrs. Chen from across the hall and made her come listen while I did it again. "I want to hear that laugh," Vince said. "You will. When he's better, when all this is over, you'll hear it all the time. He's a happy baby, Vince. He likes music and peekaboo, and when I read to him, even though he doesn't understand the words yet." "What do you read to him?" "Everything. Board books, picture books. Sometimes I just read whatever I'm reading and use different voices. He doesn't care. He just likes hearing me talk." Vince was quiet for a moment. "I miss so much." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. You did what you thought was right. We can't change it now." He tightened his arm around her shoulders. "But we're not missing anything else. Every step from here on out, we take together." The hours crawled by. Noah slept through most of the infusion, exhausted from the anti-nausea medication. Kate dozed in her chair, waking periodically to check on him. Vince never seemed to sleep, just sat there watching his son with an intensity that might have been unnerving if Kate hadn't recognized it as the same fierce protectiveness she felt. Around hour 3, Noah woke up vomiting. Kate grabbed the basin the nurses had left beside the bed, holding it while her son's small body convulsed. Vince was there immediately, supporting Noah's head, murmuring reassurances in a voice so gentle Kate almost didn't recognize it. "You're okay, buddy. We've got you. Just let it out. That's it." When the vomiting subsided, a nurse came in to clean Noah up and adjust his anti-nausea medication. Kate held her son afterward, rocking him while he whimpered against her chest. "Is it always going to be like this?" she asked Dr. Amendola when the doctor came to check on them. "The first few treatments are usually the hardest while we figure out the right balance of anti-nausea medication. But yes, there will be difficult days. I won't lie to you about that." Dr. Amendola's expression was compassionate but honest. "The goal is to minimize suffering while maximizing treatment effectiveness. We'll adjust as we go." By the time the infusion finished, it was almost 7 in the evening. Noah was pale and exhausted, sleeping fitfully against Kate's chest. Dr. Amendola gave them discharge instructions and a bag full of medications to manage symptoms at home. "Call if anything concerns you," she said. "Fever over 100.4, difficulty breathing, excessive vomiting, anything that feels wrong, you call. We'll see you back here in 4 days for the next dose." The drive home was silent except for Noah's occasional whimpers. Kate held him in the back seat while Vince drove with the kind of controlled aggression that suggested he needed to hit something. When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus was waiting on the porch with a tablet in hand. "Sir, we need to talk." Vince's jaw tightened. "Can it wait?" "No, But Kate saw something pass between the two men, some unspoken communication that made her stomach drop. "What's wrong?" Marcus hesitated, glancing at Vince, who gave a short nod. "We've identified who is asking questions about you in Seattle," Marcus said. "It's Dmitry Volkov's people, Russian operation out of Portland. They've been trying to move into our territory for 6 months, and apparently they see your presence here as a weakness." The name Volkov meant nothing to Kate, but the tension in Vince's shoulders told her everything she needed to know. "Dmitry thinks I'm distracted," Vince said flatly. "He thinks having family makes me vulnerable." "He's not wrong about the vulnerable part," Marcus replied. "But he's underestimating how you'll respond to anyone threatening your son." Kate felt ice flood her veins. "Are we in danger, right now?" "No. The house is secure, and Dmitry's smart enough not to make a direct move without more information. But he's fishing, which means we need to get ahead of this." Marcus turned to Vince. "I recommend making a very public statement about Noah and Ms. Reynolds. Establish protection before Dmitry can use the information as leverage." "What kind of statement?" Kate demanded. Vince's expression was grim. "The kind that makes it very clear what happens to anyone who threatens my family. Marcus is right. We need to control the narrative." "So we're just going to announce to every criminal organization on the West Coast that Noah exists? That sounds like painting a target on his back." "The target is already there," Vince said quietly. "Dmitry knows enough to be dangerous. Better to make the protection explicit before he decides to test it." Kate looked down at Noah, who was sleeping against her shoulder, oblivious to the conversation deciding his fate. "I hate this. I hate that my baby is being used as leverage in some criminal power play." "I know, but hating it doesn't change reality." Vince moved closer, his voice gentle despite the harsh truth. "Let me handle this, Kate. Let me do what I'm good at." She wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way. But the fear in her chest was louder than her objections. If people were already asking questions, if this Dmitry person saw Noah as a weakness to exploit, then doing nothing was just as dangerous as doing something. "What exactly does making a statement involve?" she asked. Marcus answered, "A meeting. Invitation only, all the major players in our network and the neutral parties who facilitate communication between organizations. Vince introduces you and Noah officially, makes it clear you're under his direct protection, and establishes consequences for anyone who forgets that." "And people will just accept that? They'll leave us alone because Vince tells them to?" "Most will. The smart ones, anyway." Marcus's expression was hard. "The ones who don't, we deal with them as they come." Kate felt exhaustion pressing down on her like a physical weight. She'd just watched her son endure his first chemotherapy treatment. Now she was standing on the porch of a safe house discussing criminal politics and protection strategies with men who spoke casually about violence. "Okay," she said, because what else could she say? "Do what you need to do. Just keep him safe." Vince touched her cheek, a gesture so tender it made her throat tighten. "I will. I promise you, Kate. I will keep both of you safe." Elena appeared in the doorway. "Let me take Noah so you can eat something. You haven't had food since breakfast." Kate wanted to refuse, wanted to hold on to her son and never let go, but her arms were shaking with fatigue. She let Elena take Noah, watching as the older woman carried him upstairs with practiced ease. "Come on," Vince said, guiding Kate into the house. "You need rest." "I need answers. I need to understand what we're up against. Then we'll talk. But first, food." The kitchen table had been set with plates of pasta and salad that Elena must have prepared before they got home. Kate sat down mechanically and forced herself to eat while Vince and Marcus laid out the situation in more detail. Dmitry Volkov ran a Russian operation that had been trying to expand into Vince's territory for the past year. Small moves at first, taking over protection rackets that Vince's organization had abandoned, recruiting people who'd been cut loose, but lately, Dmitry had been getting bolder. "He's ambitious and reckless," Marcus explained. "Dangerous combination. He thinks Vince is getting soft, especially after you went off the grid 2 years ago. There were rumors you'd retired, stepped back. The fact that you're in Seattle now, away from the primary operations, fits that narrative." "So he sees an opportunity," Kate said. "Exactly. But what Dmitry doesn't understand is that Vince hasn't gone soft. He's just been patient. And now that patience is about to run out. Kate looked at Vince. What are you going to do? Make it very clear that I'm still in control, that my family is untouchable, and that anyone who thinks otherwise is welcome to test that assumption once, but only once. The casual way he said it made Kate's skin crawl. You're talking about killing people. I'm talking about protecting my son. If that requires killing people who threaten him, then yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Vince's eyes were steady on hers. I told you I'd be honest. This is the honest truth. I will do whatever it takes. Kate pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. When is this meeting? 3 days, Marcus said. Gives us time to prepare and for word to spread properly. We'll hold it at the warehouse in Tacoma. Neutral ground, secure, good visibility. And you want me there? Kate asked Vince. I need you there. You and Noah. Dimitri and everyone else needs to see you, needs to understand that you're real and protected. Otherwise, it's just words. The thought of bringing Noah to a meeting of criminals made Kate want to scream. But she understood the logic. Abstract threats were easy to ignore. A living, breathing baby and his mother, that was harder to dismiss. Will it be safe? She asked. I'll have 20 armed guards there. No one gets in without being searched, and the meeting will last 30 minutes, maximum. Long enough to make the point, short enough to minimize risk. Kate closed her eyes. 3 days from now, she'd have to dress her sick baby in nice clothes and bring him to a warehouse to be shown to criminals like proof of ownership. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so horrifying. I need to check on Noah, she said, standing abruptly. Vince stood too. Kate, I'm fine. I just need a minute. She climbed the stairs on shaking legs and found Elena in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair with Noah, asleep in her arms. The older woman looked up when Kate entered. He's resting peacefully, Elena said softly. The medication is helping. Kate nodded and sank onto the floor beside the chair, too tired to stand. Elena continued rocking, the motion soothing despite everything. Mr. Moretti told you about the meeting? Elena asked. You know about that? I've been with this family long enough to know how these things work. It's necessary, Kate. Unpleasant, but necessary. I just want my son to be safe. I don't care about territory or power or any of it. I just want Noah to get through treatment and have a normal life. Normal is relative. Elena's voice was gentle. Noah will have a life. Maybe not the one you imagined, but a life nonetheless. And he'll have a father who would burn the world down to protect him. That counts for something. Kate looked up at her. Were you there when Vince's father was in charge? I was. Anthony Moretti was a hard man, like I said. He taught Vincent everything he knows about the business, but he never taught him how to be a father. Vincent is learning that on his own. And you think he'll be good at it? Elena smiled. I think he already is. Did you see how he held Noah during the treatment? How he talked to him when he was sick? That man has never shown that kind of gentleness to anyone. But with his son, it comes naturally. Kate wanted to believe that. She wanted to trust that Vince could be both the ruthless crime boss who made threats at warehouse meetings and the gentle father who soothed his sick child. But the two seemed fundamentally incompatible. Footsteps in the hallway announced Vince's arrival. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Kate on the floor, Elena in the rocker with Noah. I can take him, he said quietly. Elena stood and transferred Noah carefully to Vince's arms. The baby stirred but didn't wake, just settled against his father's chest with a small sigh. Vince looked down at his son with an expression Kate couldn't quite read, wonder and fear and determination all mixed together. I'm going to put him in his crib, Vince said. Then I need to make some calls. Marcus is posting guards outside tonight, just as a precaution. After he laid Noah down and left the room, Kate sat in the rocker and watched her son sleep. The medical monitors beeped softly in the corner, tracking heart rate and oxygen levels. Outside, she could hear the low murmur of voices as Marcus positioned security around the house. This was her life now. Hospital treatments and safe houses and criminal meetings. A world so far removed from the one she'd imagined when she first held Noah in the delivery room that it seemed impossible they were the same reality. But they were, and she had to find a way to survive it. Elena brought her a cup of tea before she left for the night, Kate sipped it slowly, staring out the nursery window at the darkening sky. Somewhere in Seattle, Dmitry Volkov's people were gathering information, making plans, seeing Noah as an opportunity rather than a child. And in 3 days, Kate would have to stand in front of them and pretend she wasn't terrified. She must have dozed off in the chair because she woke to Vince's hand on her shoulder and moonlight streaming through the window. "Come on," he said softly. "You need to sleep in a real bed." Kate let him guide her to the master suite, too exhausted to argue. She collapsed onto the mattress fully clothed and was asleep before Vince even left the room. Hours later, she woke to Noah crying through the monitor. She stumbled to the nursery to find Vince already there, lifting Noah from the crib with careful hands. "I've got him," Vince said. "Go back to sleep." But Kate moved to his side, unable to stay away. Together, they changed Noah's diaper and got him to take a few ounces of formula before he fell back asleep. The domestic simplicity of it felt surreal given everything else. "You're good at this," Kate said as Vince laid Noah back in the crib. "I'm learning." He adjusted the blanket around their son. "Kate, about the meeting. I'll do it. I don't like it, but I understand why it's necessary." "Thank you." He turned to face her in the dim light. "I know this isn't what you wanted. I know I'm asking you to be part of a world you ran from, but I meant what I said. I will keep you both safe." Kate looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes. Vince would protect them. Whatever it cost. Whoever got hurt, he would protect them. And that should have frightened her more than it did. "I believe you," she said quietly. Something shifted in Vince's expression. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "Get some rest," he said. "The next few days are going to be hard." Kate nodded and returned to her room. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the house settle around her, and tried not to think about everything that could go wrong. 3 days. In 3 days, she'd face the very thing she'd been running from for 2 years, Vince's world in all its dangerous glory. And she'd do it holding their son, proving to everyone who mattered that Vincent Moretti had something worth protecting, something worth killing for. The morning of the meeting dawned cold and gray, typical Seattle weather that matched Kate's mood perfectly. She'd been awake since 5, unable to sleep past Noah's early feeding, her mind running through everything that could go wrong today. Now she stood in front of the closet in the master bedroom, staring at clothes that suddenly seemed inadequate for the occasion. What did one wear to introduce a sick baby to a room full of criminals? "The blue dress," Vince said from the doorway. He was already dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than Kate's first car, looking every inch the powerful man he was. "Professional, but not intimidating. You want to look like Noah's mother, not like you're trying to fit into my world." Kate pulled out the dress he'd indicated, a simple navy sheath she'd bought for client meetings back when her biggest concern was making junior partner. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. Vince crossed the room and turned her to face him. "Yes, you can. You're stronger than you think. And you won't be alone up there. I'll be right beside you." "What if Noah has a bad reaction? What if he's sick or crying or—" "Then we handle it." "Kate, these people need to see that Noah is real, that he's vulnerable. It actually helps if he's fussy or showing signs of the treatment. It reminds them he's a baby, not just an abstract concept." The calculation in his voice made her stomach turn. "You're using his cancer as a deterrent. I'm using every tool I have to protect him, including the fact that anyone who hurts a sick child will be universally condemned, even in my world. There are lines, Kate, and harming babies crosses all of them." Kate wanted to argue, but she understood the logic. In the 3 days since Marcus had warned them about Dmitry Volkov, she'd learned more about Vince's world than she'd ever wanted to know. There were rules, hierarchies, codes of conduct that governed criminal organizations just as surely as laws governed legitimate society. And one of the unbreakable rules was that children were off limits, most of the time. The problem was that Dmitry Volkov had a reputation for not caring much about rules. Kate dressed mechanically, trying not to think about the warehouse in Tacoma or the men who would be staring at her and Noah in a few hours. Downstairs, Elena had prepared breakfast that Kate couldn't eat. She forced down some toast and coffee while Vince reviewed security protocols with Marcus one more time. 20 guards positioned around the perimeter, Marcus was saying. Everyone who enters gets searched. No weapons except our people. Dmitri has agreed to come alone except for 2 bodyguards, both of whom will be disarmed at the door. And the others? Vince asked. Confirmed attendance from all 5 neutral facilitators, plus representatives from the Castellano family in San Francisco, the Portland Syndicate, and the Vancouver operation. Everyone who matters will be there. Kate listened to them discuss the meeting like it was a business presentation, which she supposed it was. A very dangerous business presentation where the stakes were her son's life. Noah woke crying around 9, and Kate was grateful for the distraction. She fed him, changed him, gave him the anti-nausea medication Dr. Amendola had prescribed for treatment days. He was pale and listless, still recovering from his second chemotherapy session 2 days ago. The timing was deliberate, Vince had explained. Better for Noah to look sick, to be a visible reminder of his vulnerability. Kate hated every part of this. By 11, they were loading into the convoy, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows. Kate sat in the middle vehicle with Noah in her lap, Vince beside her, Marcus driving. 2 guards rode in the front SUV, 3 more in the rear. Overkill for a 30-minute meeting, except it wasn't really about the meeting. It was about sending a message before they even arrived. The drive to Tacoma took 40 minutes. Kate spent the time rocking Noah, who was fussy and uncomfortable. He'd spit up twice since breakfast, and his forehead felt warm to the touch, though not quite feverish. Just the normal aftermath of chemotherapy. But it made Kate's chest ache watching him suffer. Almost there, Vince said quietly. His hand rested on her knee, thumb moving in small circles that might have been soothing if Kate wasn't so tense. The warehouse sat in an industrial area near the port, surrounded by similar buildings that had seen better days. From the outside, it looked abandoned. Broken windows, rusted siding, weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. But as they pulled up, Kate could see the security. Men in dark suits positioned at strategic points, watching the convoy approach with professional vigilance. Marcus parked directly in front of the main entrance. 2 guards immediately flanked the vehicle as Vince opened the door and stepped out, then turned to help Kate. She clutched Noah against her chest and let Vince guide her toward the building, acutely aware of all the eyes tracking their movement. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed. The main floor was still industrial, concrete exposed beams, metal rafters, but someone had set up a raised platform at one end with chairs arranged in a semicircle facing it. 20 or 30 people were already seated, and they all turned to watch as Vince led Kate toward the platform. Kate's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized no one, but she could feel their assessment, their curiosity, their calculation. These were dangerous people, and she was walking into their world holding a baby who'd just thrown up on her shoulder. Vince helped her onto the platform and positioned her slightly behind him, a subtle statement of protection. Marcus took up position at the base of the platform, his hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," Vince began, his voice carrying easily through the warehouse. "I'll keep this brief. I asked you here to introduce my family and to clarify certain boundaries that will be observed going forward." He gestured for Kate to step forward. She did, her legs shaking, Noah heavy in her arms. "This is Kate Reynolds," Vince continued, "and this is my son Noah. He's 10 months old and he's currently undergoing treatment for stage 3 neuroblastoma. Kate and Noah are under my direct protection, which means they are untouchable. Anyone who threatens them, approaches them without permission, or uses them as leverage against me will be dealt with permanently. No warnings, no negotiations. Are we clear?" Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Kate scanned their faces, trying to gauge reactions. Most looked unsurprised, even bored. This was apparently standard protocol. But a few faces showed more interest, and one man in particular, tall, blonde, with ice blue eyes and a smile that didn't reach them, stared at Noah with an intensity that made Kate's skin crawl. "That's Dmitri," Vince murmured, following her gaze. Dmitri Volkov stood from his seat in the front row. "Congratulations on the child, Vincent. Though I confess I'm surprised. You've been so careful to keep your personal life separate from business. Why the sudden transparency?" "Because my son's health requires my attention in Seattle for the foreseeable future, and I want to eliminate any misunderstandings about my continued involvement in West Coast operations." Vince's tone was pleasant, but Kate could hear the steel underneath. I'm not retiring. I'm not weak. I'm simply adjusting my location temporarily. And the mother? Dimitri's gaze shifted to Kate, assessing. Quite a coincidence that she happens to be an attorney. One wonders if this arrangement serves multiple purposes. Kate felt ice flood her veins. The implication was clear. Dimitri thought she might be more than just Noah's mother, that she might be providing legal cover for Vince's operations. Kate is Noah's mother, Vince said flatly. Nothing more, nothing less. She's not part of the business, and she will not be approached with business matters. Ever. Of course. Dimitri's smile widened. I meant no disrespect, simply observing that you've acquired quite a few vulnerabilities very suddenly. A sick child. A woman to protect. These things can be distracting. The threat was barely veiled. Kate held Noah tighter, feeling him squirm against her chest. Vince descended from the platform in one smooth movement and crossed the space between himself and Dimitri with deliberate purpose. The room went utterly silent. Kate watched, frozen, as Vince stopped inches from the Russian, their eyes locked. Let me be very clear, Vince said, his voice soft but carrying easily in the hushed warehouse. My son is not a vulnerability. He's a line you don't cross. And if you're stupid enough to test that, Dimitri, you'll discover exactly how focused I can be when someone threatens my family. Is that distracting enough for you? Dimitri held Vince's gaze for a long moment, then laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. I understand perfectly. Your position is noted. Good. Vince turned back to address the room. Anyone else have questions? An older man in the second row raised his hand slightly. Kate recognized him from Marcus's briefing, Antonio Castellano, head of the San Francisco family Vince had partnerships with. What happens if the boy needs medical care outside Seattle? Antonio asked. If he needs specialists in San Francisco or Los Angeles, will you relocate? If necessary, yes. And I expect the same professional courtesy and protection in any territory I enter with my family. This isn't a local arrangement. Noah's safety transcends geography. Antonio nodded slowly. Understood. You have my word that California remains safe territory for your family. One by one, the other representatives in the room voiced similar assurances. Even Dimitri, though his tone suggested the words cost him, agreed to respect the boundaries Vince had established. The meeting lasted another 15 minutes while Vince clarified specific protocols and answered questions about his operational availability. Kate stood on the platform the entire time, Noah growing heavier in her tired arms, trying to look calm while her heart raced. Finally, Vince concluded, Thank you all for your time and your understanding. Kate and I need to get Noah back home for his rest period. Marcus will handle any follow-up questions. He returned to the platform and took Noah from Kate's arms, surprising her. The baby had been dozing, worn out from the unfamiliar environment, but he stirred as his father lifted him. Let's go home, Vince said quietly. They descended the platform together and walked toward the exit, Marcus and the guards forming a protective barrier around them. Kate didn't breathe properly until they were outside, until the warehouse door closed behind them and she could see the SUVs waiting. But before they reached the vehicles, a voice called out, Vincent, a moment. Kate turned to see Dimitri emerging from a side door, flanked by his two bodyguards. Vince immediately shifted Noah to one arm and positioned himself between Kate and the Russian. I believe we're done here, Dimitri. A private word, no threats, just business. Vince's jaw tightened. He glanced at Marcus, who immediately moved to Kate's side. Get her and Noah in the car, Vince instructed. I'll be right there. Kate wanted to argue, wanted to tell Vince not to talk to this man who looked at Noah like he was calculating his value, but Marcus was already guiding her toward the SUV. She let herself be settled in the back seat with Noah, but she watched through the tinted window as Vince spoke with Dimitri. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Dimitri said something that made Vince's posture go rigid, then laughed and walked away. Vince stood there for a moment, his hands clenched at his sides, before returning to the vehicle. When he climbed in beside Kate, his expression was carved from stone. What did he say? Kate asked. Nothing important. Vince. He looked at her, and Kate saw fury carefully controlled. He said he hoped Noah's treatment was successful, and that it would be a shame if anything happened to interfere with his recovery. Then he wished us luck. Kate's blood ran cold. That's a threat. It's an opening move. He's testing to see if I'll react emotionally, make a mistake. Vince's voice was flat. I won't. What are you going to do? What I have to. The drive back to the house was tense and silent. Noah woke crying halfway through, and nothing Kate did would settle him. He was overstimulated, exhausted, and his body was still adjusting to the chemotherapy. By the time they pulled into the driveway, he was screaming, his face red and blotchy. Elena met them at the door. Give him to me. You both need to decompress. Kate handed over her son reluctantly and watched Elena carry him upstairs, his cries echoing through the house. Then she turned to Vince, who was speaking in rapid-fire Russian with Marcus. English, Kate demanded. If you're making decisions that affect Noah, I need to understand them. Vince switched languages mid-sentence. Marcus is putting additional security on the house, 4 guards instead of 2, rotating shifts every 6 hours. And we're moving up our timeline on the Volkov situation. What does that mean? It means I'm not waiting for Dmitri to make the first move. I'm going to end this before it becomes a problem. Kate's stomach dropped. How? Vince and Marcus exchanged a look. Then Vince took Kate's elbow and guided her into the study, closing the door behind them. The room was lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk, clearly meant to be Vince's workspace while they were in Seattle. Dmitri runs his operation out of Portland, Vince began, leaning against the desk. He's been expanding aggressively for the past year, taking territory from smaller operators who can't defend themselves. He's violent, unpredictable, and he doesn't respect the old agreements that keep the peace between organizations. So what? You're going to kill him? If necessary. But preferably, I'm going to eliminate his infrastructure. Take out his lieutenants, destroy his supply chains, make it impossible for him to operate effectively. Then I'll offer him a choice. Back off permanently and keep his life, or keep pushing and lose everything, including his breathing privileges. The casual way Vince discussed destroying a man's entire operation made Kate feel sick. And if he doesn't back off, then he becomes an object lesson for anyone else who thinks my family is a vulnerability. Kate sank into one of the leather chairs facing the desk. I knew what you were when I called you. I knew you were dangerous. But hearing you talk about this so calmly, Vince, you're planning to hurt people because of something that hasn't even happened yet. I'm planning to protect my son before he becomes a target. There's a difference. Is there? Vince moved to stand in front of her, his eyes intense. Yes. Kate, in my world, you don't wait for threats to materialize. You eliminate them before they become real. It's how you survive. It's how you keep the people you care about safe. What if you're wrong? What if Dmitri was just posturing, trying to get under your skin? Then I'm wrong, and he lives to try again another day. But I'm not wrong. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know when someone is serious about making a move. Kate looked up at him, this man she'd loved and feared and run from, who was now asking her to trust his judgment about violence and retribution. When? Tomorrow night. Marcus has people in place. It'll be fast and clean, and Dmitri will wake up the next morning to find his organization in pieces. And then what? He just accepts it and moves on? Or he retaliates, and I finish what I started. Either way, Noah is protected. Upstairs, Kate could hear Noah still crying, Elena's soothing voice trying to calm him. Every instinct Kate had screamed at her to go to her son, to hold him and pretend none of this was happening. But she stayed in the chair, forcing herself to confront the reality of the life she'd chosen by calling Vince for help. I don't want to know the details, she said finally. I don't want to know who gets hurt or how. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't do anything that puts you in danger because Noah needs his father. Something in Vince's expression softened. He knelt in front of her chair, bringing them eye to eye. I promise. I'm not taking unnecessary risks. This is what I'm good at, Kate. Trust me to do it right. She wanted to. Against all logic and better judgment, she wanted to trust him. Okay, she whispered. Vince cupped her face in his hands and kissed her forehead, a gesture so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. Then he stood and returned to the desk, already pulling out his phone to coordinate with Marcus. Kate climbed the stairs on shaking legs and found Elena in the nursery, finally having gotten Noah settled. The baby was asleep in his crib, his face still flushed from crying but peaceful now. "He's okay," Elena said quietly. "Just overwhelmed. Too much stimulation for one day." Kate nodded, not trusting her voice. Elena studied her face, then squeezed her shoulder. "Whatever Vincent is planning, he'll be careful. He has too much to lose now." "How do you know he's planning something?" "Because I know him, and I know that whoever made threats today won't be a problem for long." Elena moved toward the door. "Get some rest, Kate. Tomorrow will be hard enough without you running on empty." After Elena left, Kate sank into the rocking chair and watched Noah sleep. His breathing was steady, monitored by machines that beeped softly in the corner. He looked so small, so fragile, so completely innocent of the violence being planned in his name. Kate must have dozed off because she woke to darkness outside the window and Vince's hand on her shoulder. "Come on," he said. "You need real sleep." "What time is it?" "After midnight. You've been in here for hours." Kate let him help her to standing, her body stiff and sore. In the master bedroom, she collapsed onto the bed fully clothed again, too exhausted to care. "Vince," she said as he turned to leave, "be careful tomorrow." "I will." "I mean it. Noah can't lose you. Not now." Vince returned to the bed and sat on the edge, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "I'm not going anywhere. This is a business operation, not a suicide mission. I'll have 20 people with me in complete tactical advantage. Dmitri won't even know what hit him until it's over. Promise me." "I promise." He leaned down and kissed her, really kissed her, not the gentle forehead kiss from earlier, but something deeper, more desperate. Kate kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for a moment they weren't a crime boss and the mother of his child. They were just two people clinging to each other in the dark, hoping they'd survive what was coming. When Vince pulled away, his breathing was rough. "Get some sleep, Kate. I'll see you in the morning." The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Vince was gone by the time Kate woke, already coordinating with Marcus and the team he'd assembled for the operation. Kate tried to focus on Noah, on maintaining their routine, on pretending everything was normal, but every time her phone buzzed with a text update from Vince, her heart jumped into her throat. By evening, she was a wreck. Elena had made dinner that Kate couldn't eat. Noah had been fussy all day, picking up on his mother's anxiety, and nothing Kate did seemed to help. She'd just gotten him down for the night when her phone rang, Vince's name on the screen. Kate answered, her hand shaking. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's done." "What happened?" "I'll tell you when I get home. Should be about an hour. Is Noah asleep?" "Just went down." "Good. I'll see you soon." He hung up before Kate could ask more questions. She paced the master bedroom for the next hour, wearing a path in the carpet, jumping at every sound. When she finally heard vehicles in the driveway, she rushed downstairs. Vince came through the door looking tired but uninjured. Marcus was behind him, along with 3 other men Kate didn't recognize. They all looked wired, running on adrenaline, but no one appeared hurt. "Kitchen," Vince said to the others. "Debrief there. Kate, come with me." He led her to the study and closed the door. For a long moment he just stood there, his back to her, his shoulders tight with tension. Then he turned around, and Kate saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Satisfaction. "Dimitri's operation is finished," Vince said. "We hit 3 of his warehouses simultaneously, destroyed his entire product inventory, and arrested 2 of his lieutenants for weapons violations. The police were very cooperative once I explained the situation." Kate blinked. "The police?" "I have contacts in law enforcement, people who understand that sometimes the best way to handle a threat is through official channels. Dimitri's lieutenants are looking at 20 years in federal prison. His product is gone. His reputation is destroyed, and I didn't have to kill anyone to do it." The relief that flooded through Kate was so intense she felt dizzy. "You used the law against him." "I used every tool available, including the fact that Dmitri was sloppy and left evidence all over his operations. All I did was make sure the right people found it." Kate crossed the room and wrapped her arms around Vince, burying her face in his chest. He held her tight, and she felt him exhale slowly, the tension finally leaving his body. "It's over?" she asked against his shirt. "For now. Dimitri's in no position to make moves against anyone. and I made it very clear through back channels that if he tries, the next response won't be so civilized. They stood there in the quiet study, holding each other while the adrenaline slowly faded. Upstairs, Kate could hear Noah crying through the monitor, awake again, needing attention. She pulled away reluctantly. I should go. I'll be up in a minute. Kate climbed the stairs and lifted Noah from his crib, rocking him gently while she sang soft nonsense songs. Vince appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, his jacket and tie discarded, looking more human and less like the dangerous man who'd just dismantled a criminal organization. Let me, he said, holding out his arms. Kate transferred Noah over, and Vince settled into the rocking chair with their son. Noah immediately calmed, his small hand grasping Vince's finger. Hey, buddy, Vince murmured. You're safe. We're all safe now. Kate sat on the floor beside the chair, watching father and son in the dim light. They'd survived the first real threat. But there would be others. She understood that now. This was the life Noah had been born into, and no amount of wishing could change it. But watching Vince hold their child with such careful tenderness, seeing the absolute commitment in every line of his body, Kate thought maybe they could survive it together after all. Thank you, she said quietly. Vince looked down at her, his free hand reaching to brush her hair. For what? For keeping us safe. For doing it the right way. This is just the beginning, Kate. There will be other threats, other problems, but I meant what I promised. I will protect both of you, whatever it takes. Kate believed him. And for the first time since this nightmare had started, she felt something like hope. 3 weeks after Dimitri's operation collapsed, Kate stood in Noah's hospital room watching her son sleep through his 4th round of chemotherapy. The treatments had become routine in the worst possible way. She knew exactly when the nausea would hit, exactly how many hours he'd sleep afterward, exactly what his pale, drawn face would look like when the drugs finally stopped dripping into his veins. But she also knew he was responding. Dr. Amendola had shown them the latest scans 2 days ago, and the primary tumor had shrunk by 40%. 40%. The number felt like a miracle wrapped in suffering. Vince sat in the chair beside her, his hand resting on her lower back in a gesture that had become natural over the past month. They'd fallen into a rhythm, the three of them, a strange approximation of family built around hospital schedules and security protocols and quiet moments in the nursery at 3 in the morning. The tumor board meets tomorrow, Doctor, Amendola said, entering the room with her tablet. If the response continues at this rate, we'll schedule surgery for 3 weeks from now. Remove what's left of the primary tumor, then continue with immunotherapy. Kate's throat tightened. Surgery meant cutting into her baby's tiny body, and even though she understood it was necessary, the thought made her feel sick. What are the risks? Vince asked, his tone carefully controlled. Standard surgical risks, infection, bleeding, anesthesia complications. But Dr. Webb is one of the best pediatric oncological surgeons in the country. Noah will be in excellent hands. After Dr. Amendola left, Kate sank into the chair beside Noah's bed and took his small hand in hers. He stirred but didn't wake, his breathing steady despite the poison flowing through his system. He's going to make it, Vince said quietly. Look at him, Kate. He's a fighter. He shouldn't have to fight. He's 10 months old. He should be learning to walk and getting into everything and driving me crazy with teething, not lying in a hospital bed full of chemotherapy drugs. I know. Vince moved his chair closer and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. But he is fighting, and he's winning. That's what matters. Kate leaned into him, taking comfort in his solid presence. Over the past month, something had shifted between them. Not quite back to what they'd had before, but something new. Something built on shared fear and desperate hope, and the fundamental understanding that they were in this together, whether they'd planned it or not. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Need to talk to V, not urgent, but soon. Kate showed it to Vince, who frowned and pulled out his own phone. He stepped into the hallway to make the call, leaving Kate alone with Noah. She listened to the murmur of his voice through the open door, trying to gauge from his tone whether this was serious or just routine business. When he returned 5 minutes later, his expression was carefully neutral. What's wrong? Kate asked. Nothing's wrong, exactly. But we need to talk about something, and I'd rather do it at home where Noah's comfortable. The careful way he said it made Kate's stomach clench. Tell me now. Vince glanced at Noah, still sleeping peacefully, then back to Kate. Marcus got a call from someone in my organization. Apparently there's been chatter about a weak point in our security. What kind of weak point? The kind that involves someone on the inside feeding information to people who shouldn't have it. Kate felt ice flood her veins. You think someone's giving away our location? Our schedule? I think someone might be. Marcus is investigating, but until we know for sure, we're going to tighten security even more. No one gets access to you or Noah without my direct approval. No new faces, no unexpected visitors, nothing. Vince, we're already living in a fortress. How much tighter can security get? As tight as it needs to be. His voice was firm. Kate, I'm not taking chances. Not with Noah's life. The chemotherapy finished an hour later, and they brought Noah home to the house in Laurelhurst. Elena met them at the door with warm blankets and soup that Kate couldn't imagine eating. Marcus was there too, along with 4 guards Kate had never seen before. New rotation, Marcus explained when he saw her looking. Handpicked from my personal detail. People I trust absolutely. Kate carried Noah upstairs while Vince and Marcus disappeared into the study. She got their son settled in his crib, set up the monitors, and sat in the rocking chair to wait. 20 minutes later, Vince appeared in the doorway looking grim. We need to talk. Elena's watching Noah. In the master bedroom, Vince closed the door and leaned against it. Marcus traced the information leak. It's coming from your firm. Kate's blood ran cold. What? Someone at your law firm has been asking questions about you, about where you are, why you've been on extended leave, who you're with, and they've been sharing that information with people connected to what's left of Dimitri's organization. That's impossible. I barely know anyone at the firm well enough for them to care about my personal life. What about Mark Chen? The name hit Kate like a punch. Mark Chen, the colleague who'd always been a little too friendly, a little too interested in her cases. Mark Chen, whose brother was Marcus, Vince's head of security. Marcus's brother works at my firm, Kate said slowly. You knew that. I knew Mark worked there, yes. What I didn't know was that he's been cultivating a relationship with you specifically for the past year, long before Noah got sick, long before you called me. Kate felt the room tilt. What are you saying? I'm saying that Mark Chen has been working for Dmitry Volkov for at least 18 months, feeding him information about potential targets and vulnerabilities. And when you went on emergency leave, he put together that you might be connected to me. He's been tracking you ever since. But Marcus, your Marcus, he's been protecting us. How could his own brother... Marcus doesn't know yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Vince moved to sit on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped between his knees. Kate, this is going to get ugly. Mark is a direct threat to Noah's safety, which means I have to deal with him. And that's going to put Marcus in an impossible position. Kate sank into the chair by the window, her mind racing. Mark Chen had seemed harmless, a little ambitious, a little too eager to make partner, but not dangerous. Certainly not someone who'd betray colleagues to a criminal organization. What are you going to do to him? She asked. What I have to. But first I need to know. Has Mark ever been to your apartment? Does he know where you live? He drove me home once when my car was in the shop. That was months ago, before Noah was even born. Kate's stomach turned. Vince, if he knows where my apartment is, he knows. And he's been watching it. Marcus found surveillance photos on a burner phone we traced to Mark. Pictures of your building, your car, the route you take to the grocery store. He's been building a profile. Kate felt bile rise in her throat. For how long? At least 6 months, maybe longer. The violation of it made her feel physically ill. She'd been living her life, raising Noah, completely unaware that someone was documenting her every move. And for what? To sell her location to people who wanted to hurt Vince? I want to talk to him, Kate said suddenly. Before you do whatever you're planning to do, I want to confront him. Vince's expression hardened. That's not a good idea. I don't care. He was my colleague. I trusted him. I deserve to hear from him why he did this. Kate, please. She met his eyes. I need this. I need to understand. Vince was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but it happens on my terms in a controlled environment with security present. And if he says or does anything that makes me think he's a threat to you, the conversation ends immediately. Agreed. 2 days later, Kate found herself sitting across a table from Mark Chen in a secure room in Marcus's building downtown. Mark looked tired and scared, his hands cuffed in front of him, two of Vince's guards standing by the door. Vince sat beside Kate, his presence a silent reminder of exactly how dangerous this situation was. "Hello, Mark," Kate said, keeping her voice steady. Mark wouldn't meet her eyes. "Kate, I didn't think... they said you wouldn't be here." "Who's they? Dimitri's people?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Vince leaned forward. "Don't insult our intelligence. We have the surveillance photos, the phone records, the money transfers. We know you've been feeding information to Dmitry Volkov's organization for over a year. We know you've been tracking Kate specifically. The only question is why." Mark's shoulders sagged. "It started as just extra money, you know? Law firm salaries aren't great when you're still trying to make partner. Dimitri's people approached me about doing some simple legal work, looking the other way on a few transactions. It seemed harmless." "And then?" Kate prompted. "Then they asked me to keep tabs on certain people at the firm, report on their cases, their client lists. When you went on emergency leave, they wanted to know why. I found out about Noah being sick, and I mentioned that you'd been acting strange for months before, secretive. They put it together that you might have been hiding something." "So you gave them my address," Kate said flatly. "You gave them my daily routine. You helped them build a profile so they could target my son." "No!" Mark's head snapped up. "I didn't know about the kid until after you'd already left for Seattle. By then, Dimitri's people were demanding more information, threatening to expose me if I didn't cooperate. I was trapped." "You could have come to me," Marcus said from his position by the door. His voice was carefully controlled, but Kate could hear the pain underneath. "I'm your brother, Mark. I would have protected you." "Protected me from what? From Dmitri? From Vincent Moretti?" Mark laughed bitterly. "You work for one of the most dangerous men on the West Coast, Marcus. How was I supposed to ask you for help without admitting I'd gotten involved with his enemies?" "By trusting me," Marcus said quietly. The room fell silent. Kate studied Mark, this man she'd shared coffee breaks with, who'd helped her prepare for depositions, who'd seemed like a harmless colleague. Now she saw him clearly, weak, greedy, willing to compromise anything for money and security. "What did Dmitri want with the information about me and Noah?" Kate asked. "Leverage. He knew Vincent cared about you both, even if it wasn't public knowledge yet. He thought if he could find you, he could use you to force Vincent to give up territory. And after Dimitri's operation fell apart, after Vince destroyed his infrastructure," Mark swallowed hard. "The people who worked for Dmitri didn't all disappear. Some of them regrouped, started making plans for revenge. They wanted to know where you and the kid were, when you'd be vulnerable. I told them I didn't have current information, but they didn't believe me." Vince's hand found Kate's under the table, squeezing gently. "Did you give them anything useful?" "No, I swear. I stopped cooperating after Dmitri went down. I knew it was only a matter of time before Marcus or you figured out the connection, and I didn't want to make it worse." "You should have come to me the moment Dimitri's people first approached you," Marcus said. "Instead, you put Kate and Noah at risk. You betrayed your own brother." "I'm sorry." Mark's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never meant for it to go this far." Kate stood abruptly. "I'm done. I've heard enough." Vince followed her out of the room, leaving Marcus alone with his brother. In the hallway, Kate leaned against the wall and tried to steady her breathing. "What happens to him now?" she asked. "That's up to Marcus. He's his brother, so I'm giving him the choice. Handle Mark internally, or turn him over to the authorities on various charges that will stick. Either way, Mark won't be a threat anymore." "And the people he was feeding information to? The ones who regrouped after Dmitri fell?" Vince's expression went cold. "They're being dealt with. By the time we're done, anyone associated with Dimitri's former operation will understand that targeting my family was the worst mistake they ever made." Kate should have been horrified by the casual way he discussed destroying people's lives. Instead, she felt only relief. These people had threatened Noah. They tried to use her son as leverage. Whatever Vince did to them, they'd earned. "I want to go home," she said. "I want to check on Noah." They drove back to the house in silence. Elena met them at the door with a worried expression. "Noah's been fussy all afternoon. I can't get him to settle." Kate took the stairs 2 at a time and found her son crying in his crib, his face flushed and hot to the touch. She lifted him immediately, her heart racing, and pressed her lips to his forehead. Fever. Noah had a fever. "Vince!" she called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. He appeared in the doorway seconds later, already pulling out his phone. "How high?" Kate grabbed the thermometer from the changing table and took Noah's temperature. 102.4. "That's above the threshold Dr. Amendola said to watch for." Vince was already dialing. "Dr. Amendola, it's Vincent Moretti. Noah has a fever of 102.4. We're bringing him in now." The hospital admitted Noah immediately. His immune system, compromised by chemotherapy, couldn't fight off even simple infections effectively. What would be a minor cold in a healthy baby could be life-threatening for Noah. They spent 3 days in the hospital while doctors ran tests and administered IV antibiotics. Noah's fever spiked to 104 before the medications finally brought it under control. Kate barely slept, keeping vigil beside his bed while Vince coordinated security and handled business calls from the hallway. On the 3rd night, Dr. Amendola came in with test results. "It's just a respiratory infection, nothing more serious. The antibiotics are working. We'll keep him another day for observation, but he should be fine to go home tomorrow." Kate burst into tears, ugly, exhausted sobs she'd been holding back for days. Vince pulled her against his chest and held her while she cried, murmuring reassurances into her hair. "He's okay," Vince said. "Our boy is okay." When Kate finally pulled herself together, she looked up at Vince and saw her own exhaustion reflected in his face. He'd been running himself ragged trying to protect them, manage threats, and still be present for Noah. It was too much for one person, even someone as capable as Vince. "We can't keep doing this," Kate said quietly. "Living in constant crisis mode, waiting for the next threat or the next infection. I don't know what we need, but this isn't sustainable." "I know." Vince guided her to sit in the chair beside Noah's bed. "I've been thinking about that too, about what comes after the treatment ends." "What do you mean?" He sat down across from her, their knees almost touching. 6 months from now, if everything goes well, Noah will be in remission. He'll need monitoring, but the acute crisis will be over, and we'll have to decide what our lives look like after that. Kate's heart started racing. "What do you want them to look like?" "I want us to be a family, a real one. Not just 3 people in crisis management mode, but actual family." Vince reached for her hand. "I want to marry you, Kate. I want Noah to grow up with both his parents under one roof. I want what we should have had 2 years ago, before you found out what I do and ran." Kate stared at him, her mind reeling. "Vince, I can't. You're asking me to marry into your world, to raise Noah surrounded by security and threats and constant danger. I'm asking you to marry me, the man, not the business. And yes, my work comes with complications. But Kate, I'm good at what I do. I'm careful, and I have every motivation to stay alive and safe now." He squeezed her hand. "I love you. I've loved you since the first time you walked into that conference room and tried to explain zoning regulations while you were clearly terrified. I loved you when you left, and I loved you while you were gone, and I love you now. Let me prove that I can give you and Noah a good life." Tears spilled down Kate's cheeks again, but these were different. "I love you too. I never stopped, even when I was so angry and scared. But Vince, loving you and living with you are different things." "I know. That's why I'm not asking for an answer right now. Just think about it. Think about what we could build together if you give us a real chance." Before Kate could respond, Noah stirred in his bed, making the soft sound that meant he was waking. Both parents immediately shifted their attention to their son, the conversation tabled for later. Noah recovered over the next week, his fever breaking and his energy slowly returning. The infection had delayed his treatment schedule, but Dr. Amendola assured them they could resume chemotherapy once his blood count stabilized. During that week, Kate thought constantly about Vince's proposal. Not the formal proposal part. He hadn't actually asked her to marry him, just expressed his desire to build a life together. But the implication was clear. He wanted permanence. He wanted commitment. He wanted her to stop living in the guest bedroom and start sharing his life for real. The problem was that Kate wanted it too. Somewhere between the first chemotherapy treatment and the fever scare, she'd stopped thinking of herself and Vince as co-parents in crisis and started thinking of them as partners. She trusted him with Noah in ways she'd never trusted anyone. She relied on his strength when hers failed. And at night, when she lay alone in the master bedroom listening to him settle Noah down the hall, she ached for the closeness they used to share. But wanting something and being wise to pursue it were different things. "Talk to me," Elena said one morning while they were preparing Noah's breakfast. Vince had left early for meetings downtown, and Kate was alone with her thoughts. "About what?" "About whatever's making you look like you're solving impossible equations in your head." Elena smiled gently. "I raised 3 children and helped my husband run a business for 40 years. I know the look of a woman trying to make a hard decision." Kate set down the bottle of formula she'd been preparing. "Vince wants us to be a real family. After Noah's treatment ends, he wants me to stay. Not just in Seattle or in this house, but with him, permanently. And you're not sure if that's wise. I'm not sure if I'm being practical or just scared." Kate sank onto one of the kitchen stools. "I love him, Elena. I never stopped loving him, even when I was trying to convince myself I'd moved on. But his world is so dangerous. What if something happens to him? What if Noah grows up and realizes what his father does for a living and hates us both for it? What if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow?" Elena countered. "What if an asteroid hits Earth? What if Noah decides he hates broccoli?" "Kate, you can't build a life around what-ifs. You can only make the best choice you can with the information you have. And the information I have is that Vince runs a criminal empire and has enemies who'd kill him if they thought they could get away with it. The information you have is that Vince loves you and Noah more than he's ever loved anything in his life, that he's proven over and over again that he'll protect you both no matter what it costs him, that he's a good father and a good partner even when circumstances are terrible." Elena touched Kate's hand. "The rest is details." Kate wanted to argue that criminal activity wasn't just details, but she understood Elena's point. Vince's work was part of who he was, but it wasn't all of who he was. And the man who held Noah at 3 in the morning, who memorized treatment schedules and learned to change diapers and sat through chemotherapy sessions without complaint, that man was someone Kate could build a life with, if she was brave enough to try. That evening, after Noah was asleep and the house was quiet, Kate found Vince in the study reviewing security reports. She knocked on the door frame to get his attention. "Can we talk?" Vince immediately set aside his tablet. "Of course. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I've been thinking about what you said, about us being a family." Vince's expression shifted to cautious hope. "And?" Kate crossed the room and sat on the edge of the desk, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I'm scared. I'm terrified of what your life means for Noah, for me. I'm terrified of loving you and losing you to violence or prison or any of the 100 ways your world could destroy us." "Kate, but I'm also terrified of not trying, of walking away from something real because I'm too afraid to take the risk. And I think the fear of losing what we could have is stronger than the fear of what might happen." Vince stood slowly, moving to stand in front of her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying yes. If you're still asking, if you really want this, then yes. Let's be a family. Let's build something together and see where it goes." For a moment, Vince just stared at her. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a desperation that stole her breath. Kate kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, and felt something inside her finally settle. This was right. Terrifying and complicated and completely insane, but right. When they finally pulled apart, Vince rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice. I'm going to hold you to that." They stood there in the quiet study, holding each other, while the house settled around them. Somewhere upstairs, the baby monitor crackled with Noah's soft breathing. Outside, security guards paced the perimeter. The world kept turning with all its dangers and uncertainties. But in that moment, Kate felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years: hope. The next 3 months passed in a blur of hospital visits and small victories. Noah's tumor continued to shrink under the aggressive treatment protocol. The surgery happened on schedule and went better than anyone had dared to hope. Dr. Webb removed the remaining tumor tissue with clean margins, and the pathology report came back clear. After surgery came more chemotherapy, then immunotherapy that made Noah fussy and tired but didn't seem to cause the severe reactions the earlier treatments had. Through it all, Kate and Vince built a life together. Not the romance and passion of their first relationship, but something deeper and more resilient. A partnership forged in crisis and tempered by shared purpose. 6 months after that first phone call, Dr. Amendola called them into her office with an expression Kate had learned to read as cautiously optimistic. "The latest scans are clear," she said without preamble. "No evidence of disease. Noah is in complete remission." Kate heard the words but couldn't process them. Complete remission. After everything, the diagnosis, the terror, the endless treatments and infections and setbacks, their son was cancer-free. She turned to Vince and saw tears streaming down his face. In all the months of treatment, through every crisis and complication, she'd never seen him cry. But now he wept openly, his shoulders shaking as he tried to contain the emotion. Kate took his hand and held on tight while Dr. Amendola explained the monitoring schedule and the precautions they'd need to take for the next few years. Noah would need regular scans, blood work, checkups. The risk of recurrence was real but decreasing with every month that passed. "Can we take him home?" Kate asked. "Really home? Not just between treatments?" "You can take him home," Dr. Amendola confirmed. "He's still recovering from the immunotherapy, but there's no medical reason he needs to be in Seattle anymore. If you want to return to San Francisco or go anywhere else, that's your choice now." The freedom of it was overwhelming. For 6 months, their lives had revolved around Seattle Children's Hospital. Now they could go anywhere, do anything, reclaim some version of normal life. That night, after Noah was asleep, Kate and Vince sat on the back porch of the Laurelhurst house and talked about the future. "I want to marry you," Vince said, "but I want to do it right. Not a quick courthouse wedding, but something real. Something Noah can look back on someday and see that his parents chose each other deliberately." "I want that too," Kate said. "Nothing huge, but something meaningful. Elena should be there. Marcus. Maybe Mrs. Chen from my old apartment building, if we can convince her to fly out. We can do it anywhere, San Francisco, Seattle, anywhere you want." Kate thought about it. San Francisco was Vince's territory, the center of his operations. Seattle was where they'd fought their biggest battle and won. Neither felt quite right. "Here," she said finally, "in this house. It's where we became a real family, where we learned to trust each other again. I want to get married here, in the garden, with just the people who matter most." Vince pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Then that's what we'll do." They planned the wedding for 2 months later, giving Noah time to fully recover and Kate time to prepare. It was small. Just 12 people gathered in the garden behind the Laurelhurst house on a sunny September afternoon. Elena had decorated with simple white flowers. Marcus stood as Vince's best man, looking uncomfortable in a suit. Mrs. Chen had indeed flown out from Seattle and sat in the front row crying happy tears. Noah, now 16 months old and walking everywhere with toddler determination, served as ring bearer under Elena's careful supervision. He made it halfway down the aisle before getting distracted by a butterfly and wandering off course, causing everyone to laugh. Kate wore a simple cream dress and carried wildflowers. Vince wore a dark suit and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about partnership and trust and weathering whatever storms came next together. When the officiant pronounced them married, Vince kissed Kate while Noah clapped his hands and shouted, "Mama! Dada!" in his delighted toddler voice. Afterward, they had dinner in the garden. Elena's cooking, simple and perfect. Kate sat with Noah in her lap, watching her new husband talk with Marcus about something business-related, and felt a peace she'd never expected to find. "You look happy," Elena said, sitting down beside her. "I am happy. Terrified and uncertain about a million things, but happy." "That's what love is," Elena said wisely. "Terror and uncertainty wrapped around joy. You're doing it right." Later that evening, after the guests had left and Noah was asleep upstairs, Kate and Vince stood in the garden where they'd been married just hours before. "No regrets?" Vince asked. "Not a single one." Kate leaned into him. "I called you for medical information 6 months ago. I never imagined it would lead to this." "I'm glad you called. I'm glad you gave us another chance. I'm glad you earned it." They stood there in the gathering darkness, holding each other while the lights from the house spilled across the lawn. Somewhere inside, their son slept peacefully, cancer-free and safe. Around the property, security guards kept watch, a reminder that this peace came with a price. But it was worth it. Every compromise, every fear, every hard choice, worth it for this moment, this family, this life they'd built from desperation and determination. Kate had called Vincent Moretti hoping to save her son. Instead, she'd saved them all, herself, Noah, and the man she'd once loved and learned to love again. 6 months after the wedding, Noah took his first independent steps in the garden where his parents had married. Kate and Vince stood on either side of him, hands outstretched, while their son toddled between them with fierce concentration. When he made it all the way across, they both cheered and Noah laughed, that bright, surprise sound Kate had described to Vince so many months ago. The sound of a child who couldn't believe how funny the world was. Kate caught Vince's eye over their son's head and saw her own joy reflected there. They'd survived the worst. They'd built something real and lasting from crisis and fear. And now, finally, they got to live. The call she'd made in desperation had been the right one after all. It hadn't just saved Noah's life, it had given them all a second chance. A chance to be the family they were always meant to be, complete and whole, and finally, beautifully, home.